going to call the meeting of Middleton Plan Commission Tuesday, June 13, 2017 to order. So roll call, please.
Okay. Paulson?
Here.
Hubbard?
Here.
Farrar?
Yes.
Zellers?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
Warren? Here. Reed? Present.
Wonderful. Well, the next item is the minutes of 5/23/17. And
Approval. Second.
okay, any discussion? Okay, if there are no discussion, I call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the minutes motion passes. And well, I have a question here. If anybody is here for the fence approval, is that person here or not?
Middleton Ridge.
Milton Ridge. Okay. We're going to go item number 1. This is the resolution number 2017-23. Middleton Common Council's commitment to assist pharmaceutical product development, commonly called PPD expansion, at 8551 Research Way.
So this, as you know, we've been working with PPD for well over a year to try to solve their issue that they're having on site now. They have a deficit of about 100 parking stalls currently. They're reconfiguring the interior of their building, which means that they're able to add additional employees, and they're working on getting a contract which would add 220 new employees in the first quarter of 2018. Before they make the commitment to do that, they want to know if the city is willing to make a commitment to assist them in adding additional parking on their site. And we've gone through a number of options for assisting PPD, and ultimately now what we're proposing is that we work with both PPD and Capital IRA, which is the owner of the PPD campus now, to develop most likely structured parking on the PPD site, and that we would pledge any new tax increment that is available to PPD toward the expansion of structured parking. We don't know the full cost of structured parking now. We know that it's going to be a lot more than the increment that is being generated going forward for the project, but this would help them to develop structured parking on their campus. And so right now this is just a recommendation for approval of the resolution as written to the Common Council. We would bring back a development agreement and additional details, as well as a commitment from PPD at a future meeting. Right now this is just a resolution that we're moving in the right direction.
Is there anybody here from PPD who might want to speak or say anything?
I'll recommend approval to the Common Council.
Okay, I need a second.
Second.
Okay.
Can I just, Abby, I don't recall us doing something like this before. Why is there a need for a resolution? Just to show that we really mean it?
I think it's to help show that the city continues to work on this issue, because it has been a lengthy process, and we've had several different ideas on the table, including the city looking at acquiring property off-site. We've had different ideas about how we might structure the development agreement and where the city would play a role, whether it's with, the full increment available or a portion of the increment, or whether we might be willing to even go beyond the increment that's generated from the project. So we've sort of zeroed in from all of the range of options that we've been exploring for, like I said, well over a year. We've sort of zeroed in on that, the city might be willing to commit the full increment going forward that's available for the project, and that we're looking at structured parking likely on the PPD campus rather than looking at property that we would acquire for the project.
So this is actually a much better option than we have been working in the past.
I think so.
In the past, we didn't really know who the owner was, because this property was for sale, and now we have the owner, and the owner is making the commitment. And rather than city buying the land and trying to create a parking lot and all these complex things, so in this case, much simplified, And both PPD and the owner of the property are taking responsibility. And this is what we had wanted all along in any case. And, well, it's a win-win situation. So it's a question that do we want the commitment of all the TIF money coming from there? That's the biggest question. Yes, you had a question.
Now, am I right in thinking that a structured parking is what I would call a parking ramp?
Yes.
Okay. I wish to introduce all these new terms.
Yes.
But anyway, I guess I'm concerned about where this would be on their site, because as I bike through there, when I can barely bike through the cars that are on the street, I'm wondering how 200 more cars are going to get in and out of that maze. And, is there going to be street improvements made that are going to widen? Are you going to take away all, or at least one side of the parking, on-street parking?
There have been some recent modifications to the on-street parking, which is actually from their perspective, I would say that it's exacerbated the parking issue because there's less on-street parking now that's available. And so their employees are having to look at places that are further and further out. But I think to your question, if we build a parking ramp, or if Capital IRA builds this parking ramp, that's going to help because it's going to mean fewer cars that are parking on the street because they're able to park in a ramp.
What about when they all want to go home at the same time, which is likely to happen in a place like that?
Well, most of their employees aren't shift employees. Most of their employees are professional employees. So they do have a little bit of staggering in when they arrive and when they leave. It's not like right at 5, all the employees are leaving at the same time. So it's a little better in that regard than...
Kind of identified part of that parcel of land as to where this would go?
I think we're thinking that it's going to go on what would be the eastern part of the property, the open space in the eastern U-shaped part of the building.
Yeah.
And right now there are 150 stalls in that location at the surface. And so if they were to build 2 additional levels of parking, they would get 300 more stalls.
Okay.
There would need to be interim parking, but they're looking at solutions for that interim parking for the 150 plus maybe the 100 that are on the street right while there's ramping.
Rolling problems.
Just 2 quick comments. Would, with regard to Dennis's concern, would there be a traffic impact study done as part of a development agreement for a parking ramp normally?
No, typically we do a TIA when there's a rezoning involved.
Okay.
Or conditional.
And I guess that just the second point is I like to see here that they are working on parking demand reduction through bike and transit, and just to put a word in that is staff's confident that they're taking a good faith effort to reduce the total amount of traffic on the site.
Yeah, and the other thing that we've done that is not spelled out in the resolution, we put out a survey to all of PPD's employees to find out what might encourage them to bike or take a bus or use alternate modes of transportation. And we got a response rate. We got about 400 of their employees who responded, so almost half of their employees. It was a great response rate. And what we found is the people who were driving their own vehicle currently were very unlikely to decide that they wanted to bus or bike, but 21% of their employees said that they might be willing to carpool if there were a ride share app or something like that that's available. And so we found an app that we haven't really tested, but it's a free app that you can download on your smartphone. And we've passed along the information to them, and we are thinking that as part of an agreement, we would need something in place where they would set this up for their employees, make it available, promote it to all new employees, and maybe even, provide some kind of tracking back to the city to tell us how people are using the app. PPD's employees skew younger, so they are probably more likely to bike or bus or use a rideshare app like this. So we think it's a good market. They hire a lot of people right out of the UW. So people who are used to taking a bus to campus. So we're hoping that some of those alternate methods, we can really promote that too.
Abby, how much would you estimate as the full net available tax increment generated? How much would you?
I think Bill has it now at just over 4 million, if I'm correct.
4 million?
4 million over the life of the TIF district. And I think the last estimate that we got for a parking ramp, if they were to build 2 additional levels, was about $12 million. So, and that's because you have to count the per stall cost for that first level. And right now, you know, those are just surface parking stalls that exist. So we still need to finalize the details about the increment that's available. We're working with PPD and Baker Tilly to work out those details. But it looks like the increment going forward would pay for about a third of a parking ramp if that's the solution that they decide on. But it would be a developer finance TIF agreement, meaning the city would not be borrowing the funds up front. It would all be borrowed by Capital IRA, which is the owner of the property, and then as they pay taxes into the district, then the tax increment would be pledged back to the project.
And some of that would be like out of pocket too, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, yep, about 2/3 of it would be. And they likely would build that into their lease with PPD. So, you know, if they're spending $8 million out of pocket on a ramp, they likely would have a lease agreement with PPD and charge the additional back to PPD.
So Abby, in this case, the 4 million, does it include the personal property or not?
I
Because,
believe that it does. Is that
Okay.
correct,
I think
Eileen?
it is, but also, even if that is changed, our assessor feels that the majority of improvements, particularly in this business, could be looked at as leasehold improvements and transferred to real estate.
okay.
So,
Any more questions? This is the best option on which we have been struggling for well over a year. So I think, yeah, I'm pleased that they are finally doing this, so.
And the opportunity to bring in 220 additional
Yeah,
jobs in
yeah.
a growth center is,
well-paying jobs.
Well, it's a developer finance, city isn't
developer.
borrowing it, and this is the biggest Middleton employer, from what I understand. So, anybody from PPD here? Okay. Well, if there's any more questions? If there are no more questions, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. We are recommending this to the city common council. All right, so the next is the item number 3, the concept review for this artist wreath office development. They are asking for an additional story on proposed building on 1630 Aspen Commons.
So the applicants are here, and I'm sure they're available for questions, but just to give you a little bit of background and summarize the information that was in the staff comments, this project was previously conceptually approved for a 6-story building. And the tenant for the building, it's a single tenant building. It's a national company, and they have found that in other locations, they are growing really quickly, and they just filled up a building that they just built in another part of Wisconsin. So based on that, they've decided that they would like to apply for approval to add an additional story to the building and make it a 7-story building, which it frankly fits really well within that area because we've got a 9-story building just to the south of it and the foundry to the north of it. And, you know, from our perspective, that's a great idea to add an additional about 20,000 square feet of office space. However, there are 2 issues that we ran into with this project. One is an additional story requires additional parking, and there really wasn't an opportunity to add another level of parking underground. The second issue is there's a high-rise conditional impact cost, which no one on our staff had ever heard of, but it's related to the building code and the fire code, and when you go a certain distance from fire hydrants, you are required to have some additional costs related to the building. And so this is kind of, you know, how we've used our TIF district is to incentivize additional density on a site And so we feel very much that this high-rise conditional impact cost is encouraging additional density on the site, which was sort of the, one of the primary uses of our TIF district. So we took all of this information to our TIF engineer, and he got up to speed on this and verified that all of the costs that are submitted are appropriate. He has bid tabs from recent projects, and he looks over that information, and he verified that these are extraordinary costs above and beyond the normal cost of development. So we're recommending, I guess that's the next item on the agenda, is the TIF request, but we're recommending approval of the additional TIF increment. Aside from that, there's the issue with parking, and they need an extra 60 parking stalls, and our ordinance requires 1 per 300 square feet of office space. What the developer is proposing is to provide an additional 73 parking stalls, and primarily they're proposing to do that on city-owned property that's behind the parking ramp. So that would be 46 stalls behind the ramp that's on Aspen Commons on city property. And we've been working with our utility, because our utility has a pumping station back there, and we're trying to ensure that the utility still has adequate access for any maintenance that needs to be done. We might need to actually beef up the little access route that they have back there. We would like for this to be referred to the utility board, which is the Public Works Committee, so that they can weigh in as well, because right now we've just been working with staff, and we know that there are some issues that need to be worked out. We've heard that from our Public Works Director and from our Utility Director, Dave Sarbacher, but we've also heard that they likely are not issues that are insurmountable. We will need to reroute a part of the trail that's behind there, and in working with Matt Amundsen, our Public Lands Director, it might actually make sense to look at a different route, because right now where the trail meets up with Greenway Boulevard, there are a lot of driveway crossings, and from his perspective, it might not be the best location for that access point. It might make more sense to go on the other side of Raven Software. So the building that Raven Software is in is also owned by artists. The city path will need to be rerouted, as I mentioned, to accommodate the parking lot. And our proposal right now is for concept approval to add a 7th story to the project, and then recommend concept approval to the Common Council. But we would also like, and I thought I had included this in my staff comments, so I'm sort of surprised as I look at this, we would like for this to be referred to the utility board and the
That's
Public
under the
Works
separate
Committee.
item of.
Yeah, that's the next
Oh,
item.
item number
Sorry,
5, okay.
5, yeah, 5.
I
sorry.
could have sworn I remember typing that.
You did.
Oh.
You did.
So I'll move concept approval to add the 7th story to the project and recommend concept approval to the Common Council. And did we want that to go to utilities, or is that the next one?
That's the next
That's the
one.
next.
That would be
one after.
item,
That'll be the next
yeah, it's a
one.
separate item.
Okay, so we need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, so questions now.
I have a question. The 46 stalls on city property, now what is that? Is that property now parking lot, or what is it used for now?
Right now, it's open space, utility, near the pumping station. If you ever take that trail back there behind the parking ramp, it's kind of a lot of sloped open space
So this
right
will
now.
be new parking and,
Yeah.
That's a green space, actually, it looks quite good, so. Yes, Dave?
I know this is not a landscape plan, but it looks like you have a sidewalk with an brownish orange line that suddenly disappears. Are we accommodating pedestrians on Aspen Commons? Because there'll be lots of people from parking spaces.
Oh, I think, are you talking about a lot where the sidewalk all of a sudden kind of changes to a different color? Where it changes to like a reddish brown color?
No, it comes along white at one end, changes to a reddish brown color, and then you get angle parking.
Oh, and then
it
it's-
disappears.
Right, yeah, that's a really good point. That sidewalk needs to stay. You're absolutely right. We need to have that.
Oh, that's right, in front of the
That's-
new building.
To go right through.
East
right
side.
Right, yeah, it can't just stop right there at the angled parking. You're right. It needs to, it can route around the angled parking, but it needs
Yeah,
to.
needs to exist.
Stay, yeah, that's a really good point.
I have a couple
Any more
questions.
questions? Yes, go ahead.
So on the 46 surface stalls in the, behind the parking ramp, how necessary are those? Because one option I think the utility board might be open to is, could council put a, kind of a conditional approval that they are held in abeyance, and that if there's excessive traffic and not enough parking, that we could require them to be put in later, but that, I mean, it's kind of a theme for the night of creative parking reduction strategies to minimize, the beast that is parking. I'm just throwing that out there as, and I don't know if that fits in with the, since that is on city property, just want to throw that out there as
I
one.
guess I would allow Stephen or Leon to address that and whether that might jeopardize their ability to attract the tenant to this
Right.
site. I know the tenant's looking at a couple of other
Because
sites.
I mean, oftentimes with a
Could
Class
you
A
come to the
property,
microphone, please?
right, with a Class A office, your investors and your triple net lease might want a minimum parking anyway.
Exactly. You're going to have minimum parking for a lender, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And also the tenant would be concerned with their parking also, that they might have run into some problems later on, or at those peak times when they need those parking.
So would allowing at your option not to provide the parking, but then to provide it if there's some performance standard that, it's causing trouble, would that?
In other words, delay until something comes up that you need it, is that kind of what you're recommending?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, how that affects your lender.
I mean, that's a question that would obviously you'd have to pose to the lender, right, and see what their response is to that. But obviously, our first requirement is to meet the city requirements, so that would have to be some type of variance, right, to allow.
Right, it would have to be this is currently
it's a
zoned
PDD.
PDD, so it'd be a SIP modification.
So, I mean, there is a potential, yeah, that if we ran into a situation, didn't have parking problems, parking issues, we could work around it.
But again, and for a total of how many stalls?
46.
A total of 46 stalls, when the ramp has 1,000 stalls. Again, creative
Right.
incentives to get people to bike or bus or car share. We're just trying to I'm just trying to reduce the amount of surface parking all over, but.
We've actually done some of the carpooling initiatives with our tenants at Wisconsin Trade Center and 1600 Aspen.
Yeah.
And offered preferred parking stalls for people who will carpool. And unfortunately, we haven't got a lot of people to participate with that. We've tried it. We've given, managers in charge of those companies passes to allow people to hang from their, rearview mirrors and park in those stalls. And it just hasn't been really accepted as widely as you'd like it to be accepted.
And I mean, I know you guys are a very highly regarded regional REIT, so if you say it's not going to work, who am I to tell you to
Well, I mean,
not to park there?
we're
But
open suggestions, obviously, too, to work with you on it. We think it's really, we looked at a couple different scenarios, obviously, to see what some of the solutions were in the area. And this is really working with staff, probably the best solution we came up with. There were all kinds of alternatives we looked at, so. The challenge is we can't go any deeper. There's already 2 layers down. So that's not even available to us either, so. I'm going to redevelop Aspen Commons, improve that, put parking all along there. So we're really utilizing the site to its fullest potential.
just park in Biaggi's and see what they say.
Yeah, I'm sure they appreciate that.
There you
Right
go.
around lunchtime.
Well, I have a question for you, that city actually requires 60 parking lots and you are adding 73. Why is that? Why are you adding 13 more than city requires?
I think the total requirement is really kind of flexible on what's available in the ramp. The ramp, we do parking counts, so we know where we're currently at in terms of what's available. But one of the concerns we have is that we do have a floor at 1600 Aspen that's not heavily used right now, and we think we're going to be adding more people as that starts leasing up and getting more condensed workspaces in there. So a lot of it has to do with we've got some parking we've got to add yet in that 1600 Aspen, the existing building, that's got to get filled up. So it's going to require, we'll probably have less available stalls than what we're using right now in our calculations in the ramp.
So since this is the motion for the high-rise part of it, so you guys have that other building which is 9-story, and here you're just adding one more story. So did we have a similar situation, Abby or Aline, for the other buildings which are taller than 6th floor that we had they needed this?
You probably don't know because you didn't own the building at the time. I didn't work on it. I'll see if Eileen happens
And
to
I'm
know.
not sure I understand the question.
So the other building which they have is not only just, it's
Was there
9-story.
TIF for the conditional high-rise impact fee?
Oh, not that I remember, no, not that I remember, but, my memory's not what it used to be either. Sorry, I thought you were talking about parking, that's why. I
So
was
what has changed? Why do you?
So the biggest driver on the increase in cost to go down to the floor is we're over 75 feet. When you get over 75 feet tall, now it's considered a high-rise, and now you have to build an extra protection for people to get down stairwells. So in other words, you might get away with a 1-hour fire rating in a building that's 75 feet and shorter, but you cannot get away with that with anything taller than that, because now you have to allow for 2 hours for people to get down those stairways. So that's just one of the items that increases your expense as you get taller.
It'd be a building.
It wasn't that a
code,
recent
too.
code?
Yeah, I was going to
I,
say.
Was it a
I
code
remember
change?
you guys telling
Probably
us
a
that it was a
building
more
code change.
recent.
State building code?
International building.
IBC?
Building code.
Because those buildings, the other buildings were built a long time ago, probably before the change.
How tall is the foundry? It's 4-story, right?
Yeah, it's a 4-story, yeah.
It's a nice step down, 974.
Yeah, that is nice.
Who will be using this parking? Do you think?
Parking will be used primarily for the single tenant that will use the new facility that's going to be built.
I mean, it seems remote parking, right? I mean, I'm wondering if there's possible of some passageway through the structured parking too?
There is a passageway through it. I don't know if it shows on there, but there is a doorway that actually some of the Raven employees use, also the parking ramp. So there's a passageway through that side, through the west side of the ramp already.
The fact that these new spaces would be on city land, is that strikes me as unusual as well. And how is that going to be, is that setting some kind of precedent or?
I think what we've
Perceived or-
contemplated is actually dedicating the land to artists, but if needed, keeping a public access easement.
That's a separate item, but I got the same
Yeah.
concern here. This is a public land and giving for free, so I'd be, I guess you have to look at the cost-benefit ratio.
We actually, in the TIF request, we took that into consideration and took a market cost of that land, and we subtracted it out of the TIF request, so that we had one parcel of land actually between 8383 Greenway and 8333. There's a parcel in between there that is pure parking, and there's value that's been placed on it, the taxes are being paid on. We used that value and placed it onto this 46-stall parking ramp, used the same per square foot ratio for that, and we subtracted it out of that value, which I think was around $90,000 of value that we are pulling out of the TIF request to offset for that donation of the land.
So is that what you would think that value of that land would be?
Yeah, I think so. If that's what the other parking, I do remember you talking about that now.
Yeah,
the
it's
other
right across the
parking.
street from Wisconsin Trade Center.
Okay, we don't want the public land to be just transferred for free, it has to be paid, so.
Right.
Any more questions?
We're just
this
on the
item.
concept approval on this.
This is the
story.
concept approval of the 7th story, just that part.
For the extra story, yeah.
This is
And
the
so
con-
that's,
Mhm.
it's already an approved SIP.
Yes.
But the
For
con-
6.
But this is not an SIP modification.
Actually, it's a concept for a 6-story building. The SIP will be when they bring in all the
Okay.
plans. But they're just saying now they need the extra story to 7, so.
Any more questions? If there are no more questions, I'm going to call the question for the approval of the motion to add the 7th story to this building. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion to add the 7th-story to this proposed building on 1630 Aspen Common is passed, so. So the next one is the request for tax increment finance district 3, TED 3, increased assistance by Artis Reith Office Development Project 1630 Aspen Commons, the same building, and they're asking for more TIF money for this one. Do you want to explain, Abby, or you want to do it, Elaine?
It's still a developer-financed TIF request, so the city is not borrowing any funds. It's a pay-as-you-go TIF. It's a request for an additional $682,000 in TIF plus interest. We think that the project's going to pay back in about 11 years. And again, the additional costs that are being incurred are related to the distance from the fire lane. And so our recommendation is for concept approval. The council previously in concept approved about $3,300,000 in TIF, so this is $3.9 million plus interest at 5%. And recommendation is for approval and recommend approval to the Common Council.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, questions now? Yes, Kurt?
I do have a question, which I realize the horse is already out of the barn because council's approved the TIF
In concept.
in concept.
But they approved only
Just,
3.2.
it's a concern that I'm not sure how to articulate, which is, I'm a little concerned to use TIF. I recognize that this is a really good urban infill opportunity. Artis is known for a high-quality product. It's an important employer to bring to Middleton. All the reasons to support the project. I'm just a little concerned that we're using TIF to help a tenant relocate from Madison. One of the concerns regionally is not to use TIF to compete within the region, but to compete across regions. So I'm not sure what we can do about that. So I understand that, well, I can't say the name of the company, but I understand that they're scattered across Madison right now and they want to locate.
Well, I think the deal is that their space that they're in right now they're way over capacity as far as size goes. So they've put out a RFP, and Artis is competing with 2 other sites, and I believe both of the sites are in Madison. So they are leaving their space that they're occupying currently, whether or not they come to Middleton or they decide to find a new space in Madison.
I thought
Then
there
we
was-
feel less guilty about trying to, because you shouldn't poach or try to steal.
Right.
But if someone's already moving, then you can compete.
That's true. Can I just add one?
But could I just, okay, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, that's all right.
I was just going to say, we also look at it in terms of leveling the playing field for something that otherwise, would be, like whether it's poor soils or, the increased density in an area where maybe we want that. So we try not to be in the, giving them a competitive advantage. It's more just creating, leveling the playing field for them. So, sorry.
Yeah,
And
but
the tenant has not yet selected this site, at least last that I had heard. They are still considering 3 options that they have on the table. There are a lot of things that they really like about this location. There are a lot of things, that they like about the other 2, but we think that they are sort of preferring this site, but we don't know that for sure. It's still open.
But I thought my understanding was that they have already 300 people there. They are expanding, and this is the expansion, or is it, that's not true?
They're not in Middleton.
They're not
right
in
now.
Middleton.
No,
This would be-
but this will be the newer people they are hiring, which will be coming here.
Well, they have an office building in Madison now.
We have one along the belt line.
Let me just help a little bit. They're currently in 50,000 square feet. So this is an expansion. They're looking to get, 7 floors, about 140,000 square feet. So the facility they had just built in another part of Wisconsin was 200,000 square feet, and they filled that up right away. So they're worried about this location, and that's why we had originally asked for the 7th floor. And that's what's driving the project that way.
So they will be moving from their site where they are now because they don't have enough space there.
Correct. They can't expand where they are. They want to consolidate it, keep everybody together. Obviously, it's a lot more efficient, and this location would work for them.
So when you were granted concept approval for the 6 stories, well, if not this tenant, you would still want the 7th floor for the additional office space? There's a demand. You wouldn't build unless you had the lease in place.
We would not build unless we had the lease in place, right? I guess I wouldn't say that if another tenant came along, let's say this deal didn't happen, right? Selected. If somebody else came along and wanted a 6-story, I would certainly propose a 6-story.
Okay.
And this tenant is driving the 7th story, so.
I do have some questions about the skywalk connection and the tower crane, if they are really justified TIF expenses, but I would let our TIF department answer those. So,
Well, the skywalk is, we have funded the right-of-way portions of skywalks in the past, and also to increase the capacity. In this case, I think they're looking for it because it does give them more options. Presumably, they could use a floor or 2 of the other building. That also connects them to the amenities that are in the Trade Center building. So they're connecting 3 different options, and it just expands the opportunities for the tenants that are out there. And so we have done it before. And then the crane, again, we have approved that in some cases where there's the need for a very tight area, and they have to bring in a particular kind of crane. I can't explain it, but these guys can. Tower crane.
but it's their expense.
Did that recently,
We
didn't
just
we?
did it recently, yeah. I can't remember which part.
Well, I think we did it recently when the council gave concept approval for this TIF project. The tower crane was included previously.
Oh,
Other one
yeah, you might,
too,
yeah,
Well,
I think
Hamid
you're right.
Nugani put
Oh, yeah.
that in his TIF
Yeah,
request too
I
for
think you're
Parmenter
right.
Street. Now, there was an item that our staff recommended that they remove, which was a skip hoist, and that was taken out of the TIF. So the TIF request that you're seeing now has a few items removed from what was originally requested. But the tower crane was part of the concept approval previously. The other thing about the skywalk is it allows for more opportunities for parking, because this tenant could potentially have somebody park in the Trade Center building and use the skywalk system to get to this building.
A lot of
So it
parking.
allows for more shared parking.
Yes, Dave.
Getting upset every time I drive past Spectrum and seeing where their generator is located as you drive down the highway, front of the building generator. Can I ask that you think where the generator is going and hide it?
Perhaps some landscaping and
Yes.
screening.
Generator for 1600 Aspen is located on the backside of the building between the ramp and the building, and you won't see it on your drawing probably,
Okay.
but you won't see that generator from the road at all.
Okay.
From either road as you're passing that building. This one also would be located towards the back. Very front. I mean, the very front is going to be, obviously we're going to have visitor parking. That's going to be a thoroughfare that's going to get a lot of folks parking on it.
And Dave, this is going to be a big one. This is 1,000 kilowatt.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this will be used only when there's a electricity failure, right? Or it's not used all the time. Okay, any other questions? Any more questions? Then I call the question. All those in favor of this motion, the concept approval of a total of $3.9 million in developer finance TIF assistance for recommendation to the Common Council. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so this motion of TIF funding is approved. So the next one is the concept review of the use of city property for private parking lot at 8490 Greenway Boulevard and on the east side of the Creek Corridor. And this is, Abby, you're going to talk about it?
Yeah, this is, I think our strong recommendation is that this one needs to go to Public Works Committee and the Utility Board, and as well as CLC, to work out the details of the agreement. So that's our recommendation, is for referral at this
To
time.
address their concerns.
Right.
Okay, so you did add, okay, yeah, there's a CLC. Any other committees you think look at it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'll move to refer it to Public Works, Utility Board, and CLC.
All right.
Second?
Okay, any discussion? Yes,
I don't, maybe just a word to those boards. I don't know how easy it is, but, I mean, throughout that greenway, at least on that area, it always seems like there's a lot of open spaces. I realize that shared parking with different tenants and different management, but just always feels like when you have open parking nearby, if some sort of shared lease arrangement is possible instead of paving more land, that's the green way to go. No? Green way? No, it doesn't work.
One per meeting.
any other questions? I have two reservations about this one. Don't want to give away land for free, and I want to make sure that we get the proper value for it. Number two is that if we have to move that path, if we have this parking lot there, so somebody has to pay for it other than the city, because we have that path there now, and if it is to be moved, it shouldn't be the city's responsibility to pay for it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was just say the path will likely be 4 or 5 feet at least lower than the parking lot too. So it's not going to be at the same level, so there'll be a retaining wall.
Well, I don't worry about that part as much, but if city paid for a path, it's a good path, we are using it now, and if we had to rebuild it because of this reason, so somebody other than the city should pay for it. Any other questions? If no more questions, I'm going to call the question that all those in favor of referring this to the Public Works Committee, Utility Board, and CLC, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So this goes to those 3 committees. And the next one is a sign design review for Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation on 2605 Branch Street.
The reason
Mark.
the reason why I directed that this asked the applicant to apply to the Planning Commission is because it's a new sign and a new location. So that
Okay.
by ordinance comes to this committee. I don't know if anybody's here for this item, but it's pretty straightforward. I recommend approval of the sign design and placement contingent on the use of perennial plantings to soften the sign base.
Okay. I need a motion.
Make that motion.
I can need a second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? This sign looks pretty good. I guess Mark put a good picture there too, so. Any more questions or discussion? If I call the question, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so the motion for this sign review of Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation is passed. So the next one is the specific implementation plan modification for temporary signage on Market West Apartments on Market Street. Mark?
Yep, I'm not sure anybody's here for this either, so I will provide the background. What's unusual about this is that the Market West Apartments is wishing to place a temporary sign on property of the Residence Inn. And so that's an off-premise sign, which we typically frown upon for various reasons, which I won't go into now, but the point is, because this is zoned PDD and because it's a temporary sign, I feel we have some flexibility here. It's an existing sign they plan to use. It's just basically a panel on an existing sign. So I felt it was appropriate to recommend approval of the sign design and placement contingent on the consent of the owner of the Residence Inn sign and the sign being removed by June 30th of next year.
So there is approval from the Residence Inn then?
I actually have not seen proof of that, but I will want there to be before we.
Okay.
Or it's in. Well, in Residence Inn, will complain if they don't.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah,
so I'm not worried about.
Okay. Okay, so I need a motion to approve. And need a second?
A second.
Okay,
It's actually kind of a good idea, Mark, because it's not a whole new sign.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just come
that's,
off.
for
Yeah.
various reasons, I thought it
it's
was.
the best use of the space.
Yeah, I
If they
think
even
so,
want
too.
to keep it
Yeah.
longer, what is that? It doesn't hurt anyone.
Right.
Right, we just don't want to establish a precedence of large numbers of off-premise signs all over the
Right.
place.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? Any discussion, any questions? Looks like a good thing. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion for this sign is passed.
Could we go down to 14 now and do 14, 15, and 16?
All
do you
right,
think?
yeah, oh yeah, we could, so. All right, 14, 15, and 16. We are going to skip few things in the middle, and we are going to go to 14th, 15th, and 16th. The 14th is the historic Pheasant Branch concept plan, and who is going to talk about it? Abby?
So, we previously had a concept plan approved for the historic township of Pheasant Branch, and it listed 5 or 6 goals for that area of the city near the intersection of Branch Street and Century Avenue. There are a lot of historic buildings in the vicinity. The oldest building in Dane County, the oldest commercial building in Dane County is there. That's the Stam House building. And so in addition to the plans that we have adopted in our TIP 5 project plan, we had some additional goals for that historic district. Subsequent to the acceptance of that plan, which was very conceptual, our city council recommended that we do a plan that has a few more details related to it. And so the plan that we are proposing is now available on our website, and we provided that in the packet in a link. And now our recommendation is that we would like to go ahead and notify the residents that live in that area, send them a link to the plan, and accept written comments, and then we would compile those comments, bring it back to this group. And another thing to mention is that the Landmarks Commission reviewed the previous version, the really conceptual version, on May 10th. And they really had a lot of good feedback and comments for the plan, and would like to see this more detailed version come before the Landmarks Commission as well for comments. And so I don't know when the next Landmarks Commission meeting is. It probably will be sometime in July. But I wouldn't anticipate that we would bring this back before the Plan Commission until we can get comments from the Landmarks Commission and the neighborhood as well.
So that's not listed in the recommendation for action, but should we add it to refer to landmarks?
Yes, we should.
So I'll make a motion that we direct staff to notify residents in the planning area and solicit input from residents and report back to the planning commission and also
Refer to landmarks.
refer to
Landmarks.
landmarks.
And I'll second that.
Okay, all right, now the discussion.
When the landmarks meet, could we also, at that time, set the date and let the neighbors or the people in that area know that the landmarks will be meeting, and that if they have comments, they should come into that meeting and we could all talk about it together?
We might have our longest Landmarks Commission meeting ever if we do that.
Well, absolutely, I
Few and
mean,
far between.
no, that's a good thing. More input you can have, the better it would be. So I would say there shouldn't be any problem with that, so. Yeah, so,
When we adopt this concept plan, is that will that be like an amendment to our comprehensive plan that requires a public hearing, or?
Concept plan wouldn't be, but you could, when the comp plan is adopted, you could incorporate it.
Okay.
yeah, in this case, essentially informing the residents that this is happening. And I think I have looked at it. It looks like it puts this thing in a, new developments and a broader plan. You can just slap something there and not have plan for the whole area.
Right.
So this is for the both sides of the Century Avenue and a much larger area. So it will set up a guidance document. So if there is something coming there, we have to see, does it really fit in there? So it provides a overall concept. I think it's a much better thing to do. Anybody else in the, yes, please. You want to come here and say anything, whatever you want to say, so.
What's the question? Carmen Soto, we live at 3023 Old Creek Road. And I haven't seen this plan, but neighbors have told me that the Stagecoach Trail apartment building is already in this plan, this historic plan that's sitting there. And if that's true, I'm wondering how that happened.
You want to answer?
I think that the concept plan was adopted, the original concept plan for the historic Pheasant Branch area was adopted prior to any submittal coming forward for Stagecoach. When Stagecoach Trail was first proposed, we told the developer that there was already a concept plan that existed in that area and that he would need to consider a building that would complement the historic nature of the area. So there were 3 different architectural renderings that were brought forward by the developer, and I think the first one was not, the Plan Commission didn't like the first one, directed him to go back and make changes. Same thing with the second one. Then the third one ended up not being approved by the Common Council. I believe that it's just a footprint, so it's just showing the building footprint in the plan. Obviously, we would modify that depending on what ends up happening with the Stagecoach project, but it doesn't show anything about the number of stories that might be included in that development or the level of density.
So it already assumes that the R1 rezoning has been approved to have that.
It's not binding at all on
No.
Fusion. So,
That's what I want
right,
to understand.
right.
So we thought it were all going, well, why have we been
No,
coming to meetings and
no, nothing has been approved, so it is just a, since we have been discussing that, so it shows up on the map, but if it's in the map, doesn't mean it's approved, it's just the overall concept, how we see it for the long run.
It says developer proposed potential redevelopment.
Yeah, it says proposed, so it's not,
However, I would say though that those sites, I believe, were listed as a redevelopment site because those properties are listed as blighted in our TIF 5 project plan.
Right, you're right.
So when that was adopted, I think there was some assumption that those properties wouldn't stay as single-family residential.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else want to, yes, please. Do they need to state their name or?
Well, it's not.
Okay, yeah.
I live at 2870 Old Creek Road. I'm Margaret Washaw, and I'm just, again, I'm concerned, as she is, that suddenly popping into this historic Pheasant Branch district is this 5-story apartment building that's going to not do anything favorable to the Conservancy or anything else. And so it feels like it's the cart before the horse instead of really planning what makes sense here and then looking around for who might offer that. Someone has offered something and we're cramming it into this area. And I'm hoping that, we're notified for this meeting where this gets final approval, because you're right, it'll be the longest meeting ever.
Absolutely. All those people will be notified. And this is, earlier there was just something put there, and I asked the staff, and we had a meeting that we need to have maybe there was a plan to, but I wanted to have an overall picture, what's going where, and if there's a new thing put in there, how it's going to fit there. So then our consultant, he brought this the draft for maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and now there's a more refinement to it, and before you can move forward, you need to get the people's input. So this is a proposal for public hearing and proposal for getting the input from people. So that's all there is to it. So.
And
anybody? Yes.
will we have a public hearing on the concept plan or not?
It hasn't.
It doesn't have to.
It hasn't been determined yet. I mean, the Plan Commission could, but.
But you're
Well,
certainly are referring
yeah,
it to
and
the
actually,
neighborhood for.
it might make more sense to have the hearing, if we are going to have an input session, because ultimately it is the Plan Commission that's going to be acting, maybe it makes more sense to do that at the Plan Commission meeting instead of the Landmarks Commission, because they might feel a little blindsided, given that they're not the body that's deciding or that has initiated the development of the plan.
Well, this was just for the input of it.
Right. I almost feel like it might make more sense, though, for the Plan Commission to be the body that hears
Okay.
public input rather than,
And invite the landmarks.
I mean, the Landmarks Commission is kind of one of the groups that will be providing input, I think, on the plan, but
Yeah, but I
might
think
make more
that
sense.
having them available and as a public meeting, open.
I agree too, Abby, that seems to make more sense.
I mean, the Landmarks Commission only meets a few times a year, and usually, well, Marilyn Burke is here, and she's on the Landmarks Commission. Usually they meet when, Kathy, you know too, when there's a request for a modification to a landmark building. They haven't really been as involved in planning. It's more, their role has been more reactive previously. So they might feel a little blindsided if we schedule a meeting when they haven't met in a few months, and then
Well, they had a lot of input into like the Friendly Store, the
That's true.
Western Museum, and that plan improved quite a bit.
that's true, yeah.
No, but you can look at it
No, I
and,
definitely want them to have input.
Yeah.
I think that they already have made some really, really good suggestions at the May meeting, but I just wonder if inviting a whole bunch of people to provide input at their meeting might not be the right way to go about it.
But if they want to do it, it won't be a public hearing, but it will be, your session to have input, but this will be the best place to have that input, so. But if some people want to do it twice, come to Landmark as well as here, well, more the merrier, so. I think I'm always for more public input, so.
Well, yeah.
Can I just say what a great little document this is? I mean, it's sort of, I think, in response to the two speakers, it's an idea. It's called a concept plan somewhere, and it gets the debate going. And I think that is really what its purpose is. Things will change as it matures. So, great job putting this little package together to get that debate started.
I agree. Anybody else? I know Jim is there. Yes, Jim. Thank you for coming too, so.
2533 Branch, and I've talked about this subject a couple times before, as some of you will probably. Okay.
A little bit louder.
Okay, Jim O'Brien, 2533 Branch, fairly near the site in question, and I've talked about this issue a couple times before. I guess my main concern, and I think it gets all the more acute from the little I've heard since I arrived late tonight, is sort of the assumption that certain things have already been put in place. If you find, for example, a building that's been proposed on a concept plan, you begin to scratch your head a little bit. I mean, there's been no discussion. Well, there's been discussion of the idea, but there hasn't been any decisions made. And so I'm a little curious as to why, for example, Mr. Klein's building, which he is simply proposing, is on the concept plan. It seems to me be a little bit out of place, although I agree with you. Perhaps this is just the start of a discussion, and that's perhaps all to the good if it gets people involved, and maybe that's to the good. I don't know. I did want to make a comment about what Abby said, that there's been an assumption that these two spots slated for redevelopment are sort of assumed to involve more than single-family residences. That's certainly true of the south side of Century Avenue, which is zoned in that way, but the north side of Century Avenue is still zoned R1. And that's where we are at the moment. Now, that's not to say that a discussion shouldn't take place and perhaps some changes should be made. I don't know. But I think we're really at square one as far as that particular location is concerned. There's been a proposal, but it's been knocked about, and in fact, it was denied unanimously by the Plan Commission the last time it met and by the Council, reaffirming that particular decision. And now the developers come back with a reduced plan, but we're still on square one. And I don't see how anyone can assume that that particular plan will be approved and implemented. I think we ought to start from scratch and think through the whole question as though we weren't presented with some things that we're assuming are going to happen. That's simply not the case. So that's all I have to say. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you. Anybody want to add to or answer anything, or? Yes, Mark.
I would simply point out that this concept plan and the input that we receive from it is kind of on a similar timeline to when we will likely be scheduling a public hearing for the Klein rezoning request, which is the next item. So obviously there will be opportunity to and everybody will know about both the concept plan and the rezoning request. There'll be ample opportunity for input later in the summer.
Okay. Did we have a motion on this one, or?
Yeah, I think he made the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, and, okay, so,
And the motion is to notification and refer.
yes, yes.
Notify residents and solicit input.
Okay, so the motion has been made to direct the staff to notify residents in the planning area and solicit input. And it has been seconded by Kurt, and if there is no more discussion, I call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. And the next one is refer to committees requesting for rezoning from residential single-family to planned development district, general implementation plan, stagecoach trail apartments, 6620 to 6626 Century Avenue. Who is going to, yes, Mark?
Well, as most of you know, we've received a application for rezoning, which is a bit thicker this time. And David, I have your copy here. Everybody else, and Kurt just got his. So everyone should have a copy of this for review. The first step this time is to refer this to 4 or 5 committees. I can't remember the number. 4 committees. As listed there, CLC, Public Works, Water Resources, and Workforce Housing Task Force. And that's our recommendation tonight, and to postpone scheduling the public hearing until there's a clear timeline for when the committees will have substantially done review and the TIA is substantially completed.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, any discussion? This is simply referring to the committees.
Well, they're going to be referring something that's not even in a plan, isn't even planned yet, right? It's like,
It's
Just the
a rezoning request.
It's a rezoning request.
right. But we don't know, until we have like the input session, we won't know what people are thinking about this area, if that should be R1 or whatever, so.
Well, that's
That's what this whole.
That's why it's going to the
Yeah.
committees.
Yeah.
It may not make it out of committee.
Yeah.
I get a committee recommendation.
So that's why we are sending it to all those conservancy, public works, water sources, and workforce housing. Do you think there should be any other committee we should look at it too, or that's, okay? So the motion has been made, it has been seconded. Any more discussion? If there's no more discussion, anybody else from the audience? If there's no more discussion, I call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
So the motion is passed with sending this to the various committees.
And I would
it is,
add, if Plan Commission members wish to not have this, if, this is a copy for you to review, but we only have, I think, 10 or 11 copies.
Okay.
So if this is something you wish to have us hang on to until such time as it comes back to the commission, you could leave your copy with us, and we can use this for review by other committees too. I didn't want, you're welcome to hang on to it too. We'll make other arrangements to have committees review it, but I just wanted to let you know you don't need to schlep this back and forth.
I'm going to keep mine since I'm on one of those committees too.
Okay. So the next item is the specific implementation plan modification for a fence. It's a Middleton Ridge Hack and 4442 Misty Valley Drive.
Yeah,
Mark,
so this is a request from one property owner to put a fence in that's 6 feet tall, which is what's typically allowed in R1 for a rear or a side yard fence. The zoning for the neighborhood only allows a 4-foot tall fence. I asked, did you get approval from the neighborhood association? And the applicant said that the neighborhood association has requested for the city to provide approval first, and then they'll review it and potentially approve it. There are 3 other neighbors that are also interested in doing a rear yard fence, but that's not part of the application. And this is just the rear yard that's against Greenbrier Road. So our staff recommendation is approval as a minor SIP modification.
Okay. Yes, Kurt.
So the 6 feet is only along Greenbrier on the rear,
Yeah.
right? Not along the side.
That's not.
From the picture, it looks
Looks
out,
like,
looks
Yeah,
on the
that's not what
side
this
as
drawing
well.
looks
Looks like it's on the
Side
side.
too, yeah.
Yeah,
So do we
because
have
this-
the applicant here?
So what What we typically say as a rear fence is anything that's not forward the front face of the house.
Okay.
So that's usually what we would allow in a standard R1 zoning district is a 6-foot tall fence as long as it is not forward the front face of the house. So
you
what's
would let
being
it, you would let it go across Greenbrier and then down that other side? As long as it doesn't go in front of the...
as long as it's not forward the front face of the house, yes.
Okay.
So this is basically a request for what we would allow in a typical R1. The reason that it's not allowed here is because this was rezoned to SIP, and the developer, wrote up the SIP zoning documents, and for whatever reason, they felt it was appropriate to only allow a 4-foot tall fence. I guess from my perspective, I didn't see any issue with modifying that if the neighborhood association approves it. They have stricter standards than the city.
But in this case, they would like the city council to, plan commission to approve before
First.
the neighborhood.
Right.
I would
And
move approval as a minor SIP modification.
And I'll second it.
Okay?
And
Any
this wouldn't
discussion?
be precedential. We'd have to approve every
Exactly.
fence.
Everyone that wants a request, yeah.
Yes, Mark?
I hope Eileen doesn't wince at what I'm going to say. I wonder. No, it's never good. But I just wanted to share a little historical perspective here, because this has been one of those things when you work for the city for a while and you start being here long enough and you see a history. I just wanted to acquaint everybody with the history here. Originally, Misty Valley Drive was supposed to connect all the way to Greenbrier Road, and I think Cindy remembers that. And I remember when the developer said, "Oh well, we can't make it work," and because of the way it slopes and the access to Greenbrier, and it's just not going to be a safe intersection. So we want to have permission to make that a cul-de-sac. And I remember feeling very skeptical at the time. Well, of course, it was all built, and I've been on Greenbrier plenty of times, and it could have been done. And in my view, this was an attempt to create a cul-de-sac. And so now the final coup de grace, or what's the word? The final effort here, outcome is we not only not want to be connected to Greenbrier, but we want to wall ourselves off from it. And I'm just sharing that's just what I personally think happened. It's just a reminder that sometimes when we approve developments, the developers focus on the development itself and maximizing the lots and sales and all that. But in this case, there was a lost opportunity to connect. There is a sidewalk that we insisted be provided from Misty Valley to Greenbrier, but it doesn't extend that whole way to Greenbrier Road.
Where is it?
And maybe it was just an easement. But I think it's east of 215. It's either 214 or 215. I don't remember where, but there is supposed to be a connection through there. But anyway, it's been stuck in my craw for a number of years, and when this request came in, I didn't.
All right, you got it out now,
Yes,
so
thank
that's good. You can sleep well at night.
Well, I just, it's not that I'm not mad at the property owners. It's not their. I just feel like we sometimes miss opportunities to create grids.
As a planning concept, we want connected streets,
Right.
not cul-de-sacs.
Right.
Yes. Well, it's good to clear it out.
So it's just something to be aware of for
Yes.
future reference.
Any more discussion?
Well, I just,
Yeah. First, okay, Dave, yes.
Where's the fence in relation to the boundary?
It'll be along the lot line, I'm
Along the
sure.
property
So
line.
the easement will be inside the fence?
Oh, no.
Utility, it's just a utility easement.
Utility
So it'll be
easement will
underground.
inside the fence?
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
when a property owner
Yes.
builds over an easement, we always tell them, you can do it for a fence as long as it doesn't disrupt the utilities, but if we need to access the utilities, if it's a city easement, then we require them to take the fence out at their own cost and put it back at their own cost.
Dennis?
well, when I first read this, I thought, you got to be kidding me. A 6-foot fence is going to stop a lot of noise that a 4-foot fence is? Given the topography there, the rationale for this is a joke. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other, but I also don't like fences. And so I'm going to vote against it just because I think they're unnecessary.
Yeah, it's a good neighbor city. Yes, Dennis, yes.
That's right, exactly.
Any more discussion, folks? Well, the motion has been made and seconded, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so the motion passes 6-1. So All right, now we're back to number 8. Now this is, okay, so,
I have something I'm going to distribute, and it's something from Tom Wilson regarding the town of Westport staff and the change for the Notre Dame. They are saying they do not support that change. I also have something, if people are interested, showing what was submitted in the map versus the regulating plan and the map, so I can pass that out too.
Can you say that again?
I have what was submitted as a request to support the neighborhood square footage.
Okay.
And then I have the
regulating plan.
regulating plan with the map that was in the regulating plan. So I will pass out that combination as well.
okay, so this is the concept review for proposed general implementation plan amendment. This is in Notre Dame Village at the Fact 9, the community of Bishop Bay, lot number 4, the Masters. So this is what we're going to be discussing now.
I think there, can I go ahead and talk?
Sure, go ahead.
There's two questions. Well, the first question is there enough density to allow something like this without a change? And I think at the last plan commission meeting where this was discussed, it was determined by the plan commission back in February that we thought if they were going to pursue it, they should ask for a change. The developer in the meantime has submitted something where he believes that there's enough acreage to support it without a change like that. Then there's a question of, does it make sense to put this development in this location? And I think we've listed some of the reasons why we're concerned about it. The length of the cul-de-sac, fire safety, utilities, and just the general character of the neighborhood, the types of homes that are being proposed. Does it make sense to put them in this location? So we just tried to lay out some of the issues as we saw them. At the very least, if the Plan Commission would like to continue, we feel that it should be referred to several different committees, including the Middleton Westport Joint Zoning Committee, which is also what Tom Wilson asked. The Plan Commission wishes if the developer could proceed with his request to refer it to the Joint Committee. The Joint Committee talked about it earlier this year and was not in favor of it because they felt that what was already agreed to on that lot was the open space. Anyway.
Can I just ask a question about the issue before? So it's both a modification of the GIP because it's adding lots, but also because it's changing the regulating plan in terms of the size of the lot.
It's shifting, right, it's shifting density from one neighborhood to another, and it also would have to add that type of lot to it, which doesn't exist right now, I don't think. No, I'm all in favor of adding more affordability to this neighborhood, because I think they've got a lot of good uses, a lot of good neighborhoods, but so it's nice to have, it would be nice to have more affordability. I'm just concerned about this proposal. And this isn't anything new, I don't think, to the developer. He knows how I feel as a staff person.
Before we ask Terence to present what he has to say, is that the way to go? Okay, Terence, so what is, let's hear about it, so. That's okay with me, as long as other people won't be able to see it, but
They could come up here.
If citizens want, they can come up and look.
Yeah, they
Or
can
do we have it on the, we don't have a PDF or anything on the screen. Over here.
yeah, maybe that's great. Well,
That's more.
yeah, maybe those front seat might work now. So you can tilt it a little bit, so I think, yes.
And this is, what you have on that board is the same as that's in our packets, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Notre Dame Village, that's just a placeholder name. And this is an overview plan of that area of Back 9 neighborhood. Bishops Bay Parkway, Highway Q, the Taylor Park here, the apartments in this color right here. We have apartments here. 2 buildings are built and open. A third one's going to be started next spring. We have the golf homes along here. We have our clubhouse right here with the pool and clubhouse fitness center. And then we have this parcel that's left over as part of the overall plat. The original proposal, since some of you are new, was for another apartment building just like this one. And some of the, there are just 2 or 3, 4 homes in here. And so these homes are some distance away. There's woods in here, by the way. And so there was some discussion about, okay, maybe instead of putting another 3-story, higher density, 65-unit apartment building, consider something lower density, lower height. So we put that on hold and said, let's focus on this and get that done. So we got that approved. We started construction. We've got the buildings open. So we've looked at different alternative uses. There's really only 2 alternative uses that can go here. Either you're going to have single-family homes or you're going to have apartments. You're not going to have office. You're not going to have retail. You're not going to have industrial.
What about open space?
Is it what does the adopted GIP have that as now?
It doesn't have it as a multifamily building, does
It
it?
doesn't have it, there isn't the ability to put another multifamily building in. We'd have the same issue as you have with
Right.
12 single-family units. You have to add density to the project to be,
So-
you have to approve it.
So I'm going to get to that.
So I just want to clear, the GIP is for the neighborhood.
It's for
That's
the
correct.
Not specific to any particular sub-parcel.
multifamily here, but
Yes,
the density
shows multifamily here.
overall for the back nine.
Densities have already been permitted.
They've been used.
However, let's discuss that because that is
Okay.
I totally disagree with that. The facts are, and these numbers are provided to me by the engineer and surveyor, the back 9 neighborhood, we are approved, by the way, we are approved for 4.2 units per acre. With 12 single-family homes here, this neighborhood have a density of 3.8. So we are below the approved density, even with these homes.
That's not true.
Now, there's a disagreement, and I'll explain the disagreement.
I'd like to explain it too.
Yeah.
Yes, you both.
Okay, well, I'm speaking, so
Let Terence do it and then comes Eileen. Yes, let's figure this out. Yes,
I never get a
absolutely.
leg up on you, Eileen. I got at least once, I got so the calculation that is being used for the 4.2 is without including the open space that's in the neighborhood. When you include the platted open space, that is the open space that was platted with the plats for this neighborhood, which is what is required that you do. You cannot lawfully remove the open space and then calculate the density as just housing without open space. That number is 3.8, and that is the difference in the debate. So with or without the open space that's for this neighborhood included, it's 4.2. If you exclude the open space, it's 3.8 if you include it. That's the simple argument.
Okay, let
Now-
Eileen say
Oh,
a few
yeah,
words
more?
here. Yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay.
I just want to respond to that.
Yes, that's all right.
Plan,
Yes.
Page 20 of the general development plan says neighborhood density and how it's calculated. Densities were calculated based on neighborhood boundaries as shown in map 3, which means densities include right-of-way and some parks. And then this is the map that was included in the regulating plan. You have a copy of it, it's outlined in yellow. It does not include the Woodland Park, which, when you submitted your request for additional units, you added, and I've given them a copy of that, you added 11 acres of the Woodland Park. I didn't exclude it in the original neighborhood boundary, you did.
Right. So the
It's included in other neighborhoods, not included in the back 9 neighborhood.
right. So the park, what you're saying is correct. The park is not included in the original. The park was not included, which it should have been in the
Woodland.
original Woodland Adventure Park. The other parks are
Can
included.
you show where that is? Which one's Woodland Park?
It's way up here.
Oh, okay.
It's here's a small, so this parcel's right here, and it's all of this land here.
Okay, okay. I
So it's about 50 acres. So it's Woodland Adventure Park was not allocated to any specific neighborhood because it is in the center and it borders like 5 or 6 neighborhoods. So originally, 10 years ago, when the master plan was developed, the planners, that we hired and everything, they didn't allocate that to a specific neighborhood. Okay. Our boundaries can shift.
Some parks are included, and
Some
some
are
are
Thank
not.
you.
And some are not.
Right.
Right.
So you took 11 acres out of that woodlands then, right?
And added.
No, we
Okay.
we didn't take it out. We
Okay.
platted that
Right.
part of.
Okay.
We're required by your ordinances to plat a certain amount of open space with each plat, with each development. So that's what we did. We followed your ordinances. So, anyways, we disagree, and that's that's fine. I respect Eileen, and
Well, ditto.
I'll still respect you in the morning.
Well, it's really the planning commission and the council, so I was
Right.
just laying out
Right. So it's a disagreement.
of what we think.
Right.
And that's
So,
a good thing to do.
The next thing is fire department. We met with Noel, the fire department reviewer, plan reviewer, and we're good to go. We made some changes. For example, he wanted us to spread apart the buildings just slightly so that they could take care of their ladder at a 60-degree angle, etc. We did that. We added a fire hydrant where he wants it, and a couple other little things that we did to specifically address his concerns. So the fire department issues have been addressed and will be incorporated into any final plan. Now, the biggest thing I want to highlight is that there's really, and again, we can disagree on this, that's fine, but I think that really the issue here is really that a couple neighbors complained, one in particular who's way over here above the T box. He's not even near us. He's over here. The other neighbor here, for example, was concerned about, well, what if residents walk through the woods and they might cross on their property, and said, well, I'll put up a split rail fence or some kind of nice decorative open fence just to keep them from going across the property line. And they said, great, we're happy then, we're fine. But the idea that this should not be developed at all, let's address that issue. We did provide a tree easement. So we have an easement where all of this part of this lot is preserved for trees. Okay. So we agreed way back when, all the approvals, to put this tree easement in place and to maintain that as open space. So we agreed to do that. We did not agree to put a tree easement or an easement over this entire parcel where none of it would be developed. That was never agreed to, and the proof of that is the tree easement was approved as this and is now in place. There was a center parcel here left over as open land for development. So that's what we proceeded. And part of that agreement, as part of that original approval, is we have to provide some additional parking spaces for this building up here, which are incorporated into this parking lot. Okay, those space about 30, I think is it 34 or something, some number we have to provide. So those have been incorporated as part of this development. So that's going to be built. I mean, those spots are going to be built in here. This, by the way, is an emergency vehicle access only. It's not for cars. It's only for the fire truck. So that is the proof of that. And then the big thing is, we've got multifamily here. We've got very low density single family here. And, I could see where they might say, hey, let's not jump from low density single family into high density multifamily. Okay, I can understand that. I always kind of understood that. But to have a transition from lower density single family to single family of a higher density than them, but it's lower density multifamily, is actually the ideal. Think about urban planning and planning of neighborhoods. That's exactly the kind of thing you'll see in the textbook, where you go from a higher density to a medium density to a lower density, or vice versa, backwards. That's exactly what should be here, something in between this and this. Now, we have 12 homes here shown, and these are designed to be in accordance with the original concept of Bishop's Bay, which is it's eclectic. We've got different income levels. We want to have different demographics. We want to have a variety of housing types. We didn't go into this plan. In fact, I could say the opposite. We went into this plan in spite of neighborhoods saying, we don't want multifamily. Multifamily is a housing type that should be provided within a neighborhood. The idea that we're going to have subdivisions of only one type of housing, that just is an old-fashioned idea. That's not right. It's not the kind of thing we should be doing as a community. And we are lacking a gap. We have a gap. We have a gap between the multifamily and to the higher incomes. The cost of this development of Bishop's Bay is very high, and so we have trouble getting housing under $450,000. Our two profiles of customers are 450 to 650 for their home. They come in, they want to buy their house. They want it done, they want it built. And then the customer comes in and buys a lot on the golf course or parkland, and they want to design their homes, and they want to have it built by a builder they choose. Those are roughly 750 to $2.25 million. That's what's existing and going to be built out there. We have homes being built in those price ranges. But we have a gap, and that is between the apartments and the 450. It's hard for us to get under 450.
So this is sort of affordable housing, looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, these are designed to be in that. Hopefully, we can get the cost down to 400,000 or less. 350 to 400. These are designed to be for single individuals. Could be someone divorced, a widow, just a single individual. Single car garage. They can get a second space out here on this private drive, and it's designed to be more affordable than the 450 that we can't seem to get under. Okay. It's not going to be 250. It's not going to be a starter home, or 300. Our cost structure and all the costs that go into this are too high. But it is going to be filling a gap between the apartments and the 450 home price range. And now, there is an alternative. Eileen is always challenging me, and I always try to step up to the challenge. Sometimes I fail, but we try. I'll present an alternative. I do not favor it, but I'll present it because I was asked to see if we could accomplish it. If we reduce it from 12 homes, take out a few. We took out 2, went down to 10, and we added in, specifically there was a request, well, what if you added in dual car garages? So we added some dual car garages to show what that would look like. Now, again, why am I not in favor of this? Well, one is because when I add the 2-car garage, it drives the cost up. And I can guarantee you these will cost, the ones with 2-car garages are going to cost $450 or more. I mean, there's just no way around it. I'll still have some, $350 to $400, hopefully, at the single-car garage. But I'm trying to get to a product type, for example, in the village that I live in, on the east side, and hopefully someday I'll be moving over here. There's a tremendous number of homes that have 1-car garages. Now, they're older homes, right? But they've been renovated, kept up. And they're extremely popular. They're in high demand because there's a lot of people out there who are individuals. They're single. They don't need 2-car garage. They don't need the cost of that. So that is an alternative that would be acceptable if you wanted to look at approving that. I'm open to that. I don't favor it. I do favor this one. So I'll shut up now and answer any questions you have or any challenges you want to put to me.
Let's start with Kurt here. Yes, Kurt.
I have a lot of questions. So.
Yes, let's get started.
First, I'll just say for the record that you had emailed me in my capacity as the chair of the Workforce Housing Committee asking us to look at this, and our opinion was that although it might expand the range of housing choices, do it as kind of it's really a smaller lot cluster subdivision, right? At 400,000, we wouldn't consider that workforce.
Right.
So I'll just get that on the record. But the difference between the 2 plans you just showed is 2 houses. You needed to take 2 houses off in order to get 2-car garages.
Right. For some.
And what was can I ask what the logic was for the 2-car garage?
I was just thinking maybe more like 6 homes, but perhaps ranch, but just something that might fit better in that site because of the hill. And also somebody buying a new home at 350 or 400. I agree people will go into older homes in neighborhoods where they want to be with a 1-car garage, but I think if somebody's going to pay 350 or 400 in a new setting, they might want a 2-car garage.
But if
I understand.
Can you accommodate a 2-car garage on the plan with 12?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
So if you can't sell them at that price,
well,
then you'd have to come back to us? Or
yeah,
what?
I'm going to get into. I mean, I could take this down to 8 homes or 10 homes or 6 homes and still do single-car garage. The problem then, of course, then your land cost per unit goes up. If you add a garage, then your cost per unit goes up. And now I'm in a trap. Now I've got a home that is small. Remember, these are relatively small homes.
How big?
And the trap is the home is small designed for an individual, but you got a 2-car garage cost going with it. It doesn't relate.
So it's a 2,200 square foot lot, as I see.
Yeah, the home. These could be, and again, these are just general boxes.
Probably like 1,800 square feet
exactly,
houses.
Right.
So
right.
3-bedroom, 2-bath.
Yeah, it could be
2-bedroom, 2-bath.
2-bedroom, 2-bath. Yep.
1-car garage.
Right.
For 350. 400.
350 to 400. Right. That's what we're shooting for based on the Encore construction that we talked to about what this might cost.
So my general reading of this is that if this were an decontextualized urban plan, as a planner and a houser, smaller lot subdivisions that provide a range of housing styles and types is good. That graduated density from single to multifamily is good. But of course, this is not a decontextualized plan. This is it's really a math problem of density is a numerator, something on the top over the denominator, and I'm very hesitant to disagree with staff in terms of the counting of the denominator as to how much land is included in the density calculations. And that's really, I don't object to the idea of this, what are you calling it? The urban residential lots. 2,200 is on the small side of what you'd call a single lot. The lowest I've seen them around the country is 4,000 square feet. Unless you're getting into zero lot line townhouse.
And the reason for that is because we've got all this extra open space around it.
Right,
So
you
that kind of goes with
have
it.
no lot. You pretty much, the
Right.
the common open space is the lot. And that's the standard idea of a small lot cluster subdivision. Where are the trees currently? The ones that when you drive by you can see them. So there's currently trees on what? There's a tree easement. Are there currently trees in here, but there are along here, thick in here. Are there currently trees on the area that you show for development?
No. This has all actually been graded in preparation for this parking lot.
Mark has a picture in the staff comments of what the site looks like.
Oh, a couple pictures, yeah. The picture on the left, bottom left, is looking down
Callaway
the cul-de-sac, looking towards the tree line in the back, which is in the easement.
There we go.
And then the picture on the right is down the hill to the west, looking past that new apartment. There were three apartment buildings built. And that would be, actually, you can see the gravel, that would be the access route to the
And remember that we also have permission approved in our MDP and our GIP that densities can shift within this plan, within the overall context of the master development plan. So that's in there. And I don't know, that's why I don't know why we're getting hung up on a number. I really don't. We have the authority to shift densities. We're only talking about 12 units. If you want to approve 8 or 10 or whatever, fine. I'll change the plan to reflect that. But I don't think this should be zeroed out to 0. I don't think that's fair to us to have no development on this parcel.
It's apparently what Westport thinks too, so that's... So the other question I have is, the only way to access single-family houses is through a private drive through the apartment complex.
Yes.
Was there any discussion, I realize this muddies the water, instead of making Callaway Court a cul-de-sac, and I realize it's higher end housing and they want a cul-de-sac. The theme for the night is parking and cul-de-sacs.
Yes, exactly.
To just actually have that cut all the way through so that this is not a private drive.
So I agree with you 100% on that. Unfortunately, Callaway Court is owned by Phil Simon, Michael F. Simon Builders. It is a private drive. I have no control over that. Unfortunately, that was during that time period when, we had that New York guys in and they cut that deal. I thought it was extremely foolish. I would never have done it myself to cul-de-sac this off. Just the wrong thing to do.
Dave?
That explains a lot.
Are you done, Kurt?
For now, yeah.
Yes, Dave.
I have one really puzzling problem. These are 12 housing units, 12 single-family housing units, 24 parking spaces for those maximum, right? Two spaces per unit. And yet there are 46 units on this site.
Right.
And so there's an ulterior motive for providing parking for somebody else.
Yes.
Now, I would really object, I think, to buying a single-family house with my one-car garage and a second space next to it and 2 more designated parking spaces right in front of my house. You've almost got a 0 lot line on that front of the side of the building, right? So I wonder. I wouldn't buy it. Let's put it that way, right? Why would somebody else want to have two stranger cars
Right.
at any time of the day or night parking right in front within, I'm guessing, 5-10 feet of the front of their house?
So that's a good question. The reason, let me explain, the reason for that is to provide the city, we wanted to meet the city requirements for parking for this building here, this apartment building. So city agreed and we'd put these spaces on this lot. We know from our experience with over 1,000 apartments that these apartment residents will never use these spaces, but we have to meet what the city required of us. So we have the parking provided, although it won't be used by the apartment residents because we have plenty of parking for them based on our experience, but we have to meet the requirement.
It'll
So
be
that's
used
why.
by them in the sense of asphalt right in front
Yes,
of the house.
yes. So I agree with you. The alternative is, another idea we kind of bantered about, you could consider, is, instead of 12 units, go with 9, take these 3 out, and provide, like a parking lot here to satisfy that number, and then you would take away some of these spaces, right, to address what you just said. So it's a valid concern, a valid question you're bringing up.
I just can't see people wanting to live in a parking lot.
Right.
More questions?
At $400,000.
Right. So we could do that. We could, put the parking lot over here and take them out from here and bring a little bit more, green space in. I think we've done a good job we created a walking trail on both of these all the way around, so you can do there's a lot of walking trails and sidewalks here.
Even that's a little strange, Terence.
Yes.
I mean, you're walking right up against the front of the building.
Yes.
And you're crossing what is essentially the private driveway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So you're
Yes.
not really creating sidewalks as such.
Creating parking lot sidewalks.
Parking lot
Yes.
access, yes.
So we have that alternative idea you could consider too.
Cindy?
This proposal doesn't strike me as being different than the one we looked at. Maybe a few minor modifications here and there. And I agree, I don't disagree with the staff comments either. I'm not sure why we're talking about it again.
Because he proposed the amendment. And so,
I mean, I know you have to bring it to
Yeah.
us, but,
Yeah.
right.
but it doesn't strike me as any more, something I'd be any more interested in than last time we talked about it.
And if I can just go back, I think a lot of the history is in the staff comments, but I know it was a lot of information. The Planning Commission, when they approved the back 9 neighborhood with the apartments and the tree easement, that was because it was the maximum density, and it was thought that, well, that's open space, there's a little bit of parking for the apartment project, and also the fire lane as the access for the apartments from Callaway Court. And I think the Plan Commission even said, recognizing that the density for that neighborhood would be done.
Right.
I really support all the housing choices that Community of Bishops Bay offers. There's actually, out of 2,500 units in the city, 1,600 of those will be multifamily, half condo and half apartments. And then there's also a traditional neighborhood proposed up off of Onken. There's a town center. So there's a wide range. The stuff that you'll see later on tonight on the agenda for the prairie and the farm neighborhoods in the town is clustered housing with, larger lots but more green space around it. So there's a wide range. And I understand your desire to want to have something there, but for the reasons that we mentioned, we feel like, is that the appropriate thing? There's a lot of pavement there. The idea behind the tree easement was to protect that area, and would you really be doing that if you're sending more runoff from impervious area that's increased beyond what anybody ever dreamed of for that site to that area? I don't know where the drainage goes.
Yeah, we've added a drainage pond here, and we have another one we added over here by building 1.
I just feel like there's maybe if there's going to be something proposed, maybe there's something that's more creative and gets some of the things that, but also would address all the issues like the utility issue. We don't know if there's enough capacity for water.
There is.
And also the fire concerns.
Yep. So would you be
Protection of the tree easement.
would you be open to give me some feedback on,
Up to the Plan Commission.
as a group, to do something like, take it down to 9 or something? Would your parking lot here be something that you want me to do and take out some of the parking here, take the number of units down to 9 or 8 or something, come up with a little different plan? I don't know what
So
you would be open
these
to.
9 units, you would take them from which of the other approved neighborhoods?
No, he has 12, I think, isn't it?
Well, these 9 or 12.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, I mean, I realize that
Right.
not,
So
you're
assuming,
not accepting the premise of my
Right,
question, but
right.
if you do, where would you take these from?
We believe, based on as we start to get into this more, remember this plan was developed 10 years ago and we were guessing, right? So we wanted flexibility built in. We think that we're going to have some additional units left over from other neighborhoods. In fact, such that we think we're going to end up taking those and putting them into the town center as additional, units in the town center. So we have, we think, based on just some preliminary looks at our different neighborhoods, we're going to have some of these units left over, and we could plug, 8 or 10 here, and the rest we're going to put in the town center. So we think
So
we'll have a surplus in some of these neighborhoods.
Hypothetically, if we were to approve some concept plan, staff would keep track of that, and they'd have to be calculated against some future.
We have a cap
'Cause,
of
well,
of
I
1650
think the
apartments
concern is that
and
we would flex
1350s,
into
and-
each development additional units, and you'd end up with a large neighborhood with no units, and then you'd come back for an additional request for more units.
Oh, no, well, yeah, we have a cap.
There's an aggregate cap on the whole site?
Yes.
There
And-
is, but
Yeah.
I think
I understand what you're
2,900.
saying, because
Right, because, I mean, if we box ourselves into a corner and then you leave a large chunk that's
Right.
open,
Right, I understand what you're saying, but we think we're going to have surplus where we're going to be adding the units to the town center, which
Can you show
has
me
the
town center?
flexibility.
Where's the town center on that map?
and while he's looking, okay.
Okay. And the town center is in the town? or
It's in the city.
It's in the city.
The Alderman.
The commercial space.
The Alderman
apartments.
Pike area, I wasn't at the February meeting where this was discussed, but I know he had said he felt that when the Back Nine neighborhood got approved and the apartments were done, that if there would be anything proposed on 4, it should be after there's more of the neighborhood built, to determine where are the, what types of housing are we seeing, where are any areas of surplus or, not as many units or whatever, and that there might be something later on. I think he felt this was too early. I don't want to speak for him, but that's what I heard from the meeting, that it was just a little premature.
That's what I was just about to say, is if you operate on the premise that there's going to be a surplus in the end, as we go further and further into it, I would rather not do this now and come back and look at it later if we need to. But
Are the apartments already built?
Yes.
Okay,
Due to
that's the
exit-
ones,
right.
two of the three.
Right,
yeah.
so here's the dilemma. I understand what you're saying, but in the real world, we have to deal with holding costs, but we also have to put in this parking lot. So we have to put in the parking spaces when we build this building in the spring. So we got to figure out where to put that so we don't have to tear it out and rebuild it again. I mean, you could tear it out and rebuild it again, but that adds costs. So, I'd like to get an idea or feedback, is a number like 8 or 10 or 6 an acceptable number, and then we can go back and develop a more creative approach and come up with a separate parking lot for the apartment building, and return to you with something different.
What if the city said, well, we could see our way clear to deal with the existing parking, with the idea that if there needed to be parking in the future, additional parking, I mean, I can't remember the numbers on that third unit, but if you didn't have to put it in right now.
Well, yeah, that would help, yeah. It's like 34
and
spots or
so
something,
it's-
yeah.
I mean, I can't remember
Yeah.
again what the units are, but
And Eileen, you're talking about the 34 spots
that have
That
to
are in there,
intersperse.
yeah.
Right.
with
that are interspersed within this
Yeah.
proposal.
Would you be open, let me ask this, I'm not saying I agree with this, but would you be open to allowing this house to go forward, which is along the golf course side, because that's where I would want to build my house, and then I come back later with the plan for the rest of this later, and we could defer the parking, and you could order me to put it in later if we need it, but not build it right now. Well, that's okay. I mean, you can.
my answer to that is no,
no.
because then we've gotten started.
And we get boxed in, yeah.
Let's see.
I could see going with the 8 or 9 units on the don't know whether, which is south, lower side of the road, and doing a well-landscaped parking lot on the north side, up against the other buildings.
And is there
And I
some,
think if you did it carefully, you could get an entrance into the parking lot such that it didn't use the street that was residential.
Which street? The private drive in front of the house?
I meant to bring a pointer, and I didn't.
Oh, from this drive.
There you go.
This part gets used as parking.
For
Somehow
building
from
3.
the private driveway,
Yeah.
you get into that parking.
Oh, I see.
So that you don't get traffic
Right.
driving
Gotcha.
on what is the residential street.
I see what you're saying.
And if it was 8 or 9, as David suggested, it would still be these smaller lots.
Yes, but the parking would be removed from the front of it.
Yes, right.
So there would be
Right.
more, there might be slightly larger lots because there's
Yes.
more front yard, if you want to call it that,
Yes.
and a sidewalk and street trees perhaps, I don't
What's
know.
the smallest lot on which you could get a 2-car garage? 40?
With, you mean our existing lots that we have in our
No,
approval?
in this, if you were to propose something in this urban residential.
With a 2-car garage? Well, I can tell you, when we did the village lots in phase 1, when the village lots were done in phase 1, and they were typically 65 to 75 feet wide, we ran into 2 problems. They weren't wide enough for the 2-car garage, and the impervious area numbers were too low. So the builders couldn't meet the requirements, and so it wasn't working very well. They had to custom design homes. We had to get variances for impervious area. So if you're 65 to 75 feet wide, it's really tough to make that work unless you custom design something where you're just looking at garages out front. You know, remember our requirement is the garage has to sit behind the home by at least 2 feet. If you go to some of these starter home neighbor, all you see are garage, right, and a door.
Outhouse,
Yeah, exactly. We don't want that. Right. But let us be creative and go back and look at this based on your feedback.
But a 2-car garage would force your lots to be
Wider.
70 feet?
At least 75, 75, I think.
Okay, so you couldn't get 8 on that south side.
Well, we'll take a look at it. Yeah, I don't know. We may not get 8. I'll check.
and I understand the desire to keep the costs down, and maybe people do just want a 1-car, but I was worried that if the city went through and approved it, and we went through all the things, and then there's not a market for it, then what?
But what we could do is we
That's true,
could design and get approval for up to 2-car garages, but then we present to buyers, hey, if you're a single individual and you just want one, we'll just build you one. You've got the extra sitting there, without it being built, as an approval if you ever want it in the future.
Assuming everything else could get worked out, all the issues that we've raised, is there any way to make these affordable from the sense that we would be looking for, or more affordable than you're talking? Is there any way?
Sure, we could waive all city fees.
Oh. Other than that.
Okay. Other than that. That's our problem. The construction costs have gone up so much recently. Yep. I mean, they tried to put through a 30% lumber increase. I mean, I think it got pushed back.
I wondered if there was something that would otherwise make it more
palatable. Yeah, I get it. We're trying to put brick on these too on the front side to make it look colonial, New England looking. That adds a little cost.
But this is
when we're talking about workforce housing, even if we're going to go up to
that's like 250,
100% of median income, we can maybe go up to 280, 290.
Right.
Not going to happen here.
That's not going to happen here.
I mean, you could do duplexes, I guess, and that might save a little bit.
Sure, that would help.
I'm not sure that's a good idea, though. But we'll look at it. We'll look at other creative ideas.
More questions or input?
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Do
Dennis.
you have a driveway that goes over a utility easement?
Yeah.
Yes.
But you can.
Yep.
It's just that has it ripped out. You have to.
Right, right. I realize that, but it just looks to me like, you could do something like that with lot where house 12 is there, and, you know, make better use of that land, which will allow it to be able to spread a little bit more the other way. And I even think that you certainly could get one, I think, across the street number 3, particularly since that can shove over a little bit. Maybe even 2, I don't know. You know, you'd have to lay out the parking area, I guess.
Right.
As David has defined it, but it just seems you'd come really close.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll go back and take a look at it. You know, that's good to get the feedback, and we appreciate it.
Okay, so that's all we needed here
And
for
well,
now.
Tom Wilson just said, you know, again, they're not for it. He said, please pass the opinion along to the Plan Commission. If the Plan Commission does feel it should proceed to review the item, I would respectfully request that the item be referred to the Joint Zoning Committee for their review and advice.
So that's,
I don't know if the Plan Commission.
But what does that mean? That
I'll just wait until
we would have to wait until he has a
Right.
design on
proposal.
a different proposal
Yeah.
to refer.
let's not make more work.
No, that's true, so.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
okay, so wow, this is a great input, isn't it? Great team here, folks. All right, so the next item is,
Are they getting easier? Yeah.
It's the Terrence Wall show.
so this is the community of Bishop Bay in the town of Westport, and it's a specific implementation plan and preliminary plat, the community of Bishop Bay, the Prairie, and the Farm Phase 5.
And the.
And in this case, it is in Westport, so we are
It is in
simply,
Westport.
yes.
And the town is asking if the Plan Commission would recommend approval of the plat and the SIP, the conditions that would be placed on it by the town. We have 3 conditions from our engineers who presented that to Westport, and they added it to their conditions. I didn't make copies because it's lengthy and it's tiny print, but they have 47 conditions. So,
Wow.
well, their recommendation is they'd like to see the City Plan Commission recommend approval of the plat and SIP with whatever you might want to add in addition to the conditions and restrictions recommended by the town plan. And the Joint Zoning Committee is going to look at this at their meeting next week on Wednesday, the 21st.
And again?
Dennis and Leaf and Kurt will be seeing it. On
Yes.
You'll be
so
bored by the time
you guys
like
will
100
see it
times.
again.
And the Town Plan Commission held the public hearing last night on it. And they recommended conditional approval with the condition, the 47 conditions.
Yep, as did their Parks Commission.
And we have 3 conditions to be placed on
And
it.
do you accept those 47 conditions? Are they
I don't know what all of them are yet.
Oh.
are they technical?
They're putting the list together, but we have seen a preliminary list, which we provided comment back on to the town, and a lot of them were just, a majority of them were items that a developer will normally take care of once the town gives approval. Then you do your final plans and you incorporate those items into the final plans. You wouldn't do those until you did the final plan set. So the approval needs to come based on the conditions, and then you go incorporate the conditions into the final set of plans. So most of those items were items like that. They were, benign. They were no big deal. Others we were addressing by making some tweaks and changes, and the town, I think, is quite happy. They approved it. The Parks Commission over there approved it. We've been working on this for 10 years, but specifically this plan we've been working on for, I don't know, Eileen, how long, like a year and a half? So.
And the 3 conditions that the city is recommending were part of the 47 that the town put in, and that was a water study, the water for the area shall be completed, and the study shall conclude that there will be satisfactory water supply to Phase 5 and all existing city water utility customers prior to planned construction in 2019 of the Pheasant Branch connector, which the developer is paying for through the water utility district that was created. The second one is approving an agreement for construction of the city's southerly meter station in Outlot 16 of the Back 9 neighborhood with the city developer agreement, and that was deferred out of Phase 4 when it wasn't known when the transmission line was going to be built or when the town was going to develop. The third condition is the city receiving payment in the amount of $485,541 to the city utility district for the platted area, and then that would be removed from the utility district and bear no further, have to have no further charges for the utility district. But as land is platted in that utility district, they pay for their full amount and then they get removed from the utility district. So those are the three conditions that the city engineering asked the town to place on it, and they're in the list. The other ones, as he said, are fairly technical, the city developer agreement, things like that. Building envelope shown, tree inventory done. A lot of the things also stem from conditions that were placed on this when it was first zoned back 7 years ago, I think. Just tree inventory.
Okay, so any more input? I mean, here we need a recommendation to the Westport
To Westport.
Joint Zoning Commission.
And the only question for us is to refer it to the Westport.
Yes.
Because since it's a SIP in the town, has to be we don't approve it, the joint.
You're just saying that we recommend that they approve it, I guess, with the conditions that would be appropriate.
And three of those from Middleton, they're pretty important, so.
Yeah.
Got it. SIP and plat, preliminary plat with conditions.
I'll second that.
Okay. So do I have a motion?
Yes.
You do.
Okay.
Is that a motion in a second?
Okay, so okay, all right. So any more discussion now?
If you feel more comfortable too, I can go through a few of these. Again, I'm sorry that I didn't make the.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I think that's all right.
I mean, and staff recommends approval, that it's consistent with the master development plan?
Yep.
Okay.
With those conditions, three
With the
Middleton conditions and then the Westport. Okay, so any more questions or, yes, David?
Just remind me that this is the same person presenting this who said he didn't like cul-de-sacs a minute ago?
Oh.
Yeah, I looked at it and I said to Mark, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs.
These are hamlets.
They're hamlets.
I'm just kidding.
How long are they? They're very
3
short.
houses.
There are 3 houses. So you hit the nail on the head. This is in the town, and there are certain, I'll call them requirements, that the town wants to maintain the rural town character of all development within the town. So there are things like rolled curb instead of right angle curb. We're not going to have street lighting. We've got these hamlets. But one thing I will say is every one of these hamlets has an easement for a trail easement through it, linking to an open space area, including the prairie down here, our buffer here in the state park, and to our orchard and our park. We're preserving the silos, by the way. But I did want to highlight that we're building, I'm sure Mark will like this. Oh, your arm, you can go biking now.
Are fences allowed on these cul-de-sacs?
So we have a standard of 4 foot also for the fencing. We don't like fences, but sometimes they request them, and we keep them off the easement areas so that's not going property line to property line. So we're proposing to build a bike path. I don't know if you know, but the county is building a bike path. They finished the Woodland to County M, and now they're going to go from County M, along County M with a boardwalk, over the Ohio River to the drive that goes into the state park. And that is this.
Oh.
Let me get my pointer, sorry.
But to clarify, they haven't budgeted for it yet. They're not building it.
Right, they're planning on that.
That's different than building.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're sure talking like it.
I just wanted to say one quick thing too about the prairie, and maybe you can chime in the same thing for the farm. The town wants to have the developer create like a town prairie mix that the neighbors that build in that area are required, so that there aren't invasive and that it's fairly uniform. And there's areas within each lot that will have the prairie or farm portion. Maybe you can talk about what's there.
So can I finish the bike path real quick? So you're going to ride on their new path when that comes, and then you'll ride down the street. I talked to the DNR, and by the way, this has not been easy. You got the county and the state, and they don't talk to each other, they don't like each other. So I'm trying to act as the bridge and the mediator. The DNR is moving ahead with a variance to map this bike path through here, and this is based on the DNR planner. He routed this, which is kind of really kind of cool. It's a very picturesque route to the tunnel that exists, and then we'll pick it up there, and we will develop the bike path along County M. Here's the tunnel, and behind the traffic here at our entrance, and then down to the county property again, where they'll pick it up someday. Then we have a bike path going through our development along Bishops Bay Parkway, and someday there'll be one along Onken Road. So this is pretty exciting, to bring all these parties together to make this happen. Hasn't been easy. Now, the prairie. Yes, the prairie. If you look at the prairie square here, the hamlet here, you have to have a minimum amount of prairie grass around your lot. And you can have a certain amount of lawn around your house, but then after that it has to be prairie grass. In the farm neighborhood, you can have farm plots, garden plots on your property. And then we have community garden plot areas where you can take a section that you can farm and grow your vegetables or flowers or whatever you wish. All of our hamlets, all housing has some kind of trail to a trail that connects to a county trail or a state trail. So we have a tremendous amount of trail connections throughout this entire neighborhood. We have orchards in here. When you come in, the median will have an agricultural theme planted in the median. There'll be some sunflowers, some other agricultural crops. We hope to have an antique tractor out there as a sort of a themed, branding of the farm neighborhood. The street names are based on farm and prairie names. We're saving the 2 silos out here. And then the Sam Jacobson Memorial Park, the Jacobson family is looking at making a donation potentially to help fund that improvement of that park. So that would be pretty exciting. So they've got some really neat things going on here with a prairie neighborhood and a farm neighborhood. I think it's going to be a big hit here in Dane County. Our farm neighborhood has got the most interest of all of our neighborhoods. So I think it's pretty exciting. Is that what you were thinking about talking about? Okay.
Any questions? And David, that was very appropriate and timely. Okay, well...
made the comment that, I think Eileen made the comment, Westport won't have sidewalks. They want runoff curbs.
Right.
Yes?
Yes, so there will be no sidewalks, which is why we have this extensive trail system for all the homeowners to get to.
And that's even on the sort of the through road.
Oh, well, the through road will have this 10-foot wide, the Bishop's, okay, I see.
Not the Bishop's Bay.
Okay. So Bishop's Bay Parkway will have a 10-foot bike walking trail on it, paved.
But these are lighter orange roads.
Yeah, these roads right here, as of last night, they're talking about Silo Prairie Drive being a private road. They were telling that's probably what they want. This other one will be, Burning Prairie will be public, and there would be no sidewalk along there. But all of these homeowners have the ability to access a trail either in this park that connects to other stuff, or they can walk down here and connect a trail here to a trail along here, and then we got permission from the county to connect to their trail in the prairie unit.
And did you say there is curb and gutter, or there is not?
Well, it's curb. It's a rolled curb.
Rolled curb.
With a ditch.
A ditch, yeah.
A rural stormwater ditch, yes.
But surely making that private drive, doesn't that interrupt your pedestrian links?
So it would be private. Anything that's private, like this orchard area is private. When I say private, it's going to be owned by the HOA. So all of the 6,000 residents of Bishops Bay technically could use it, but there's nothing to stop somebody from the public from walking there. It's privately owned by the HOA to the benefit of the HOA members, but it's not like there's any restrictions or anything. Yeah.
Okay, so, well, we had good discussion now, so I'm going to call the question of approval or recommendation to Middleton Westport Commission with all the 47 plus 3 Middleton conditions. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. It goes to Milton Westport Joint Zoning Commission. So the next one is updated Walker parking study, Milton Center, 7507 Hubbard Avenue, 1818 Parmenter Street, 7609 and 7611 Elmwood Avenue, 800 Parmenter Street, and 7600 Terrace Avenue.
Want me to show some?
Yes, please.
Well, on the Walker parking study, we did provide the, provided in Shire so you could review it. We didn't make hard copies. But what they found was, and I talked with Ezra Kramer from Walker Parking today, he's the one who has been analyzing it over the different scenarios. The deficit for weekday occurs at 5 p.m. to midnight. With the proposed change to 305 restaurants and with the 20,000 square feet of office change to 14 apartments, there's a deficit of 52 spaces from 5 p.m. till midnight every weekday. On the weekends, it's a higher deficit, and it's about 104 spaces from 5 p.m. to midnight. Because of those changes, because there's more activity at night in the restaurants and there's more apartments versus office, which would be during the day, which it worked perfect before. The recommendation would be, and I recommended conditions of approval for the Middleton Center GIP and Phase 2 SIP, would be that the developer has to install 17 additional lifts in Phase 1 and 29 parking lifts in Phase 3, which cuts the weekday deficit in the evening to 6, and then would have to come up with a workable solution acceptable to the city for that. And then same on the weekends, find the greater, the 58 spaces to deal with. And then the other ones are things that were left over from the previous approval. Resolution of engineering staff recommendations, which I did provide to you. I think they just haven't done their revised plan yet till they have of these other things settled. There were some staff comments on previous submittals, primarily typos. And then Phase 3 is not approved as part of the GIP yet because they have to remove the buildings from the existing sidewalk easement. The GIP needs to be revised to include the original elements, which got dropped off through the reiterations of the plan. Landscaping plan must be submitted and approved by the city, which I think we have it, but that was an original condition, so I left it in there. The parking management plan has to be revised. Must specify that all parking is to be included in lease and rental rates, not charged separately, and the parking should not be gated unless specifically approved by the city. The developers agreed not to gate it at this time, but to have to come back and ask for it in the future. But that would involve another analysis of the parking. And then there's a few discrepancies on plans. And again, I think they've just been waiting for their approval of these changes to make those. I did talk with Ezra about the proposal to have parking at Bruce Company. And he said, that far away, it's likely to be vehicle storage versus everyday use. So maybe somebody's just not going to keep their car there, a tenant, they're going to keep their extra car there. He said it's potentially could work. There's also a chance maybe to lease something closer, or maybe that's the backup and they can work towards something closer. Because really, a 5-minute walk, which is kind of the standard for new urbanism, is 1,250 lineal feet. The Bruce Company's
it's about 4,200.
It's about 4,000 or 4,100 lineal feet, and Veterans Health Administration, for instance, is about 2,000 lineal feet. But it feels closer. They could walk down Terrace. They could cut across on the existing pedestrian walkway across the rail corridor and be at any phase of the development. So those are just my planning staff comments.
Yes, Kurt.
The parking that's included in the rental for the apartments, is that how many stalls per?
I think it's
Is
one.
it per bedroom?
You guys talk into the microphone.
You have a chart, or there's a chart in our materials?
One on the left there. So it's 1 for efficiency, studio 1.5 for 1 bedroom, and 2.0 for 2 bedroom.
I did ask Eileen that how does our parking requirements compare with the other cities, and if we have made any changes, and is it really something else we could look into? And she did say that in this case, it's not what we ask, what was required by the city, which would have been much higher. This is, which is by
Shared
the
parking.
shared parking, and it's much lower than the city requirements. So that has been adjusted. But we will still look into that, with the way technology is changing. Do we really need that many parking spaces? But that will come with time. But I did ask Eileen to look into it. So
In the future, I will check that
Yes.
out, but you're right about both of these.
So, last time you were here, there was some question about what we would call maybe people who are in an apartment but not actually parking there at any one time, or who leave their cars there during the day because they're at home during the day, because some of the shared parking requires this idea that businesses are during the day and apartment residents are at night. I forget what that efficiency ratio was. And you took exception to Walker's determination that some percentage of apartment residents would leave their cars in that lot during the day. Under this new study that we've just received, have you changed your mind? Have you accepted their methodology? Or is you still disputing that?
I'm not aware that they changed that number, did they?
Well, they didn't
I didn't
change it,
see
but I
that.
think the issue is during the day now isn't the deficit.
Oh,
Right,
I don't-
okay.
I think that's what they.
So the alleged deficit is
The alleged
the peak hour.
The alleged deficit. But
I gotta keep her laughing, I gotta.
But you're right, Kurt, that was, I think they included 50% at home, during the day. But they don't have a crunch during the day, it's when the apartments are.
Right.
Right, it's 5 p.m. dinner hour.
Because
right?
of the
dinner hour.
restaurant.
Right.
Because of the restaurant
Right.
changes. Otherwise,
Yes.
we might have, because I was thinking the same thing,
Now-
maybe go back and ask Walker. I think we talked about it maybe
Right.
as a staff. Should we ask them, I think maybe
Right.
it was even Abby's idea, should we ask them to look at a more aggressive assumption? But it doesn't make any difference because, at this point, because of the change in the program, the issue is at night. So even if they said only 10% of the cars are in the garage during the day from apartments, it won't help the crunch at 5 o'clock and beyond, right?
If there's a deficit, that means someone tries to come and go to a restaurant, can't find parking and leaves, or it means an apartment resident tries to come home after work and she can't find a spot.
Good question.
I don't-
That's a very good question.
So,
Because one
There-
is, those are both problems, but
Yeah.
one's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
so there's, first of all, let me lay out a couple things. One is, this is a PUD, right, or PCD, whatever you're calling it. PDD, community is different. So PVD, so there is no parking standard. It's whatever you approve, okay? You don't have to follow the court ordinance. It's whatever you approve. That would become the standard for this zoning. Second of all, we have dissected the Walker parking study. And, we come tonight, full court press, because we got to get this approved so we can start construction in July, so we can open in July. Otherwise, we're going to have to wait a whole year. And that could jeopardize the financial feasibility of the project because we will lose a year TIF. And construction costs are going up every single month. So what we'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Ken Voigt, who is the senior traffic engineer with Ayers Associates. He and his associate, John Lichtenheld, have been considered for 40 years or more as the experts in traffic and such in Madison area. I've worked with his associate for decades. So I want to have him come up and talk to you about the Walker parking study, and then we have some comments about the Walker parking study. Now, I'll give you two examples as a setup here. One is at our Peloton project in downtown Madison, we have 159 units, and they're allowing us 157. Is that 150? 157 units, and they're allowing 159 parking stalls. So almost 1 for 1. All of our parking
apartments.
Yes, with some commercial space. So it's very much like this.
Singles and 2-bedroom units?
It's the same. It's studios, 1s and 2s. In fact, some two-bedroom dens. So, and then if you look at the Hovde proposal on the MAT seat in downtown Madison, they have almost the exact same number of parking spaces we are proposing here, physical spaces, but they're having more apartments than us, a 10-story office building, and a huge hotel. And that, you know, you look at it, it's a massive development, and they're only being required to have the same number of parking we're providing.
Has that been approved?
No, they have to go through the process.
Okay, so
But
they're
Madison
proposing it.
Yeah, Madison has
So
typically been approving 1 for 1. They don't want to approve more parking than is necessary. They want to encourage people to ride their bike, walk, take the bus. You know, they're kind of the opposite. They don't want to encourage people to have a ton of parking and therefore more and more cars and more traffic. So they have a different approach. So let me introduce Ken.
Except that is downtown, so it's...
Right, that is downtown. And just for the
Downtown
record,
Madison, yes.
I've now heard Terrence Wall talk about affordable housing, sustainable agriculture, and alternative transportation. So I'm wondering if that's going to be your platform for elective office.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I'm Ken Voigt, as Terrence indicated, and it's nice to be back in Middleton. I had done some pedestrian safety studies in downtown a while back for you folks. I'm a registered professional engineer. As you can tell, the other day I was introduced and they told me I've got a half a century of doing these types of studies. That's kind of scary. But I've done a lot of traffic and parking studies, but I've also taught how to do parking studies for the University of Wisconsin professional development area, as well as at the UWM regular graduate student level. So with that said, I did conduct a detailed review of the Walker parking study, and it was founded on the ULI shared parking methodology, which was published in 2005, I believe. From that review, I can offer you the following professional opinions. First, I would conclude that the ULI approach appears to create a oversupply of parking. But what's that based on? It's founded on parking data published by ITE. The ULI approach is in this document. This was published in 2004. There is currently a 2016 document published by IT very recently that updates some of the numbers that's used as a base for the ULI methodology. A closer look at the data helps support, you might say, that initial conclusion I have. I would also indicate there are national trends in parking, and you've alluded to it a little bit right now, that how we analyze parking has changed over time. Communities are seeking a balance between the automobile, people, and the environment. An oversupply of parking, which was part of my conclusion, encourages automobile use, which you mentioned, discourages transit use, obviously, increases environmental problems with impervious surfaces and air pollution with more automobiles, but even more importantly to most communities, reduces the productive use of urban lands. Vacant parking lots or parking lots don't allow for development and tax space and so on. Donald Shoup, a national expert, indicated that the trend is definitely going to providing maximum parking requirements. And if you do research with other communities, look at communities that have gone to maximum as opposed to standards that are minimum, which is kind of what's in the IT documents, as well as I believe your standard is kind of built on. And that's a way of kind of assuring you don't have an oversupply of parking. my review basically, and the utilization of the latest IT data, I'm adjusting it for, I didn't throw the whole computer model up on the wall and run it, but I looked at average weekday and used the IT rates and documented what the reduction was for shared use that was out of the Walker report. Interestingly, for Saturdays, it was a 30% reduction from what the rates would yield. On Saturdays, it was a 16%. Weekdays, 30%. Saturdays, 16%. And that's why you see the higher demand showing up a little bit on Saturday, even though the total parking demand is less. If you look at that, it's reasonable to say there's a need for approximately 425 spaces in a approximate value for this development. Now, I can go through all sorts of numbers, but that's the basic conclusions that I found it on.
So, but when you look at the Walker study, so I don't exactly know how many spaces they recommend. So, you think the need is for 424. Now, you mentioned two books. One is the 2005 book, where it's about the shared study, and the other is the 2004 minimum standards. And you also mentioned that city was using the minimum standards. So, when you use the minimum standard, you end up with 500 and something, right?
End up with more parking.
Or 600.
Yeah. So it's actually then the other document from 2005, that's probably shared parking, that's more appropriate. So what is the difference between what you have come up with and what is Walker has?
Well, you're trying to create a model. You got to be careful, and I tell my students this all the time, that when you use a computer model, it's like putting it into a black box and something comes out. What you need to know is what's going on. I'm sure Walker Parking is aware of what's going on inside those models, but you try to adjust it, is that the right term, to affect local conditions. There are some rates for parking for apartments that have a very high correlation factor, which means it's pretty accurate. Correlation factor is between 0.93 to 0.97. 1.0 means it's a perfect fit, Middleton-wise. When you look at the restaurant uses, and there's like 3 or 4 categories, there's a brand new category that IT, between this document and the one that just came out, includes coffee shops. Those rates vary so much, they don't even they don't calculate a correlation factor because of the scatter and the number of samples they had. So you got to look at that a little more suspect, if you will, when you put them into the model. There's a fundamental difference in which category of rate that you use. ITE provides a whole series of parking rates for one land use. And it will say the average highest demand. If they did 20 studies, it'd be based on 20 studies, based on 1,000 square feet or number of dwelling units, that kind of thing, or number of seats in a restaurant. The average peak demand is X number per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. Okay. IT goes on to say that this is normally accepted as a reasonable estimate of the likely parking demand for that type of land use. The ULI methodology uses a different number that comes out of the IT manual. That is the 85th percentile parking demand. So they aggregate everything together and say 15% of the time you'll be this side, 85% of the time you'll be under it.
Yearly, the 85th percentile yearly, not daily.
Well, it's done by day. There are correction factors that ULI has that IT doesn't, that says that during the morning it might be 50% of that daily rate, during the evening it might be 100% of that daily rate, that kind of stuff. So it will adjust it for that. And I don't have any questions about that. That's a pretty good data source. But the 85th percentile, which is used in the ULI methodology, and it references ITE. There's some discrepancy there, but uses the 85th percentile. So you automatically get a higher, an increased oversupply, if you want to use that term. So those are some of them. Of the differences. When you look at some of the data sets, I believe like apartments range from 0.68 spaces per dwelling unit to 1.9 spaces per dwelling unit. And the updated information says use 1.23 spaces per dwelling unit. The city is, I think, the only one that shows it for efficiency or 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom. IT says the average number of dwelling units in all the studies they did was 1.9 bedrooms. So it's probably a little on the conservative side based on the city standard. Those are the types of things that I'm talking about that make a big difference in what you really need and what the black box is kind of giving you. I concur 100% with the concept of the shared car correction factor, and I believe there's a 10% transit correction factor that was applied. I didn't quite see it in the calculations, but that's what it reports. The city of Eau Claire, and this is, I think, kind of in keeping with Middleton and the Madison area, gives you a 5% reduction if you're providing bicycling racks and lockers, which this community is pretty bike, Marco can attest to, bike dependent. So those are other things that kind of weigh into coming up with some final numbers. And then I applied just that general reduction of what the overall difference was in the Walker from unadjusted to adjusted to the value that the IT rates would give me.
So, excuse me, can you give me just 3 figures?
Oh my God.
How many spaces are provided by the Terrace Wall proposal? You mentioned 402 of your study, or so 400?
I said it should be somewhere between 400 to 425.
Okay, and then what the city is asking for? Just those 3
My understanding is the Middleton Center proposal is 402 spaces. Yes.
Including lift and slide.
ULI analysis, the most recent, dated May 30th, if I've got my numbers right, is 506 spaces.
During the weekend, 5 p.m. to midnight.
Yeah.
And the city?
The city would normally require 590 or 602.
590.
I can't remember.
I got 594.
594. There
But
you
you're
go. I'm
close.
close.
Yeah.
And that's,
But it takes those as standalone land uses.
Right. And that's why we were looking at the shared parking.
Yeah.
And I think those are good questions, David. I think your numbers were 425. The Walker parking said on the weekday deficit in the evening is 454, so it's 29 spaces difference. Fairly easily made up with lift and slide. But a large portion of the parking of the 402 is lift and slides. And so it's not just straight parking that you go in and it's just easily.
The biggest factor is the apartment parking, as far as the number of spaces required.
So,
In your experience, oh, sorry.
yeah,
Well, I was just wondering, just specifically for the lift and slide, in your experience, did those count as a full stall, or because they're, you have to drive in and have your car moved up on a carousel, would you count that as?
They don't adjust for that at all. If you're, it's similar to office parking. If you're an employee there, you know where to park, and you're going to use that space if it's available. If you got surplus parking, you may not go through the inconvenience of a lift or something like that. Same thing with apartment. If these are the designated spaces and you're entitled to use that, then you probably will. If it's just there and you've got a surplus, there's a likelihood they may not use it because it's more convenient just to park on a surface spot.
And
And you've
yes,
got an oversupply, you know what the result will be.
correct.
So, a couple technical questions and then a comment.
I got lots of numbers.
So, no, so I also teach my students through the PGM, the Parking Generation Manual.
Yeah, yeah.
And because generally, suburban areas are overparked anyway. And I know Don Shoup, so,
Oh, okay.
But in the new edition of the 2016 PGM, is the numbers for the restaurants that Mr. Wall is proposing, have they changed?
They've changed slightly.
And they've gone up or down?
Apartments have changed slightly.
Those have gone down or up?
It actually was 1.2 originally, and now it's 1.23, so it went up a little bit.
But they don't.
Time of day, it changes, whereas the original document, it was the same regardless of the time.
But the PGM does not look at number of bedrooms in a development.
Correct.
They just do square feet.
They
of the
look
building.
at the number of dwelling units.
Okay.
So if it's 100 apartments, that's the number they use,
Right.
regardless of how many bedrooms. And they say that their average for all their studies was 1.9 bedrooms per dwelling unit.
Right. So here's the conceptual question, right? So each land use generates a parking demand based on ordinance, and which is based on the ITE. Shared parking allocates the idea that not everybody's going to park at the same time. And so we have to, at a certain level...
Office employee, you're not going to be there on
Right, you're not, you're right, restaurants, office, apartment.
Yeah.
We have to, at some level, accept at face value Walker's methodology based on the ULI report, recognizing the fact that it's not a precise forecast, but they give us the mid-range, and there's some variance, obviously. But I want to ask the question of risk. If we oversupply parking, if the city requires the developer to put in additional parking, he bears an extra financial cost, which may or may not alter the project. But if we allow him to undersupply parking, then who bears that cost? So we're kind of trying to balance risk. If we undersupply parking in the development, and someone coming for a restaurant on a Friday evening can't find parking inside but parks on the street, this was the concern of the neighboring businesses, right, that you'd have this spillover traffic.
Yep.
And we want to create a vibrant downtown at all times of the day, but we don't want to disadvantage, and we want to make this project work, right, because it's a center point of downtown redevelopment. But we don't want to disadvantage existing businesses, the other restaurants nearby. If someone comes home who lives in an apartment, if I lived in an apartment there, and, it's not affordable, it's $1,900 a square foot a month, right? And I can't find parking on Friday night, I'm going to be pretty upset.
Yeah.
So then we get to the issue of, could some of the parking be specifically designated only for apartment residents, but that throws off your shared parking numbers, because you can't allocate it to any shared parking under the ULI model if it's specifically labeled, apartment 235. So can you help us think through that? The risk factor of we don't want to make the developer overpark, because that nobody likes too much parking.
Yeah.
But if he underparks, we get
Trade-offs.
a problem. We get spillover on the street, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
I think the first thing to answer, and unfortunately, I sense there's a time crunch with some hope for July, approvals or something like that. Almost every document, whether it's a traffic study or a trip generation study or parking study, references if there's local data, use that in place, because that reflects what's going on in your community. Not having the time to do that, we've got to rely on what's going on nationally, and is our concern to encourage biking and transit use and so on, like they're doing downtown Madison? Or are we comfortable with more impervious surfaces and what trade-offs that has? It's not a black and white answer by any means.
We want more biking and walking, but the residents of the higher-end apartments downtown, if to the extent that they bike and walk, they're biking and walking to amenities or walking, right? They're not commuting by bike peak hour.
Yeah, they're not going grocery shopping.
It's not peak hour journey to work
Going to work, yeah.
bike commuting.
Yeah.
Unless you're Mark Opitz. Right. So,
Yeah, there are.
Well, right, but many of those people still own a
Cars.
vehicle, and so
Yeah.
the problem there is if they're biking to work, they're leaving their vehicle in the garage, which means it's still.
but these
It's actually causing
these households
more of
might
a
own
problem.
one car instead of two.
So the millennials are totally different than the other generation, so I can't generalize, but we all know the millennials are not owning cars at the level that the other generations do. And in our other developments, especially in downtown Madison, we have people walking and biking to work. We are 2 blocks from a hospital. We have people living there that walk to the hospital work. We're literally 4 blocks from university. We have the chairman of the real estate department living in our development. He can walk to work or bike to work.
Those buildings exist side by side downtown.
Well, yes, close.
They don't exist down in Middleton downtown side by side.
But we do have an enormous employment center here in the Greenway Station and Greenway Center, the Rayovacs, all of that is accessible by a bike trail or by walking. But let me give you a couple other statistics. We offered to do a B-cycle station. The University Hospital came to us, and they had John Livesey lined up. Trek won't do one without doing 3 in Middleton, because you need to be able to park them, right? You get on the bike, you need to be able to go park them. So we said, yeah, we'll be the 3rd station. Now, at the time we proposed this, I know Eileen was, tell me if I'm wrong, you were in favor, but the council kind of shot that down at the time. It was a different council. They just wanted the parking. And we could provide a dozen or 20 B-cycle bicycles in a station that then UW and Livesey would provide also, which would reduce, we should get a credit for some parking if we do that. Madison gives us a credit, right? This report, this Walker report, did not consider any transit. We didn't get a credit for any transit, any bicycles. The only thing we got credit for was the community cars.
Where's the closest transit station to the development?
Well, Madison Metro comes right here.
Yeah, well, it comes along Parmenter and Terrace.
Yeah, so it's right at the property.
Is it within a quarter mile of the property?
Yeah, it's right on Parmenter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think they
Right.
took a small percentage. They just said they didn't, I thought.
No, I think they didn't. They said they didn't give us any transit credit. You also have a trolley. You should be trying to encourage the use of the trolley. We got no credit for the trolley. Now, I also called the restaurants, and they know their employees, right? And they double-checked it, and they got back to me, and then we ran the numbers. I don't think I gave this to you yet, Elaine. So it was actually Van Nutt who graciously thought of, hey, we better add a 11:15 p.m. bus pickup, because many of these restaurant employees will be people without cars. And so we asked our restaurants and ran the numbers, and it's 35 employees are estimated based on their actual counts, and then adding the other 2 restaurants. 35 employees would be taking that 11:10 or 11:15 p.m. After the restaurants close, they'll get on the bus. They don't have a car. They won't be parking in our building. So we'll do B-cycle. 35 employees are taking the bus. They got no credit for transit or trolley. Also, you got to consider, the Walker study assumes 100% occupancy 100% of the time. That means every seat in that restaurant is full 100% of the time. Every square foot of office space is full of employees 100% of the time. Every apartment is full 100% of the time. The reality is, I can tell you right now, in downtown Madison, for example, they overbook their parking ramps, as they should, just like airlines do, but they don't throw you out and drag you out of the ramp. They overbook their ramps by 20%, or 10% at Madison. City of Madison overbooks by 10% because they know people are on vacation, they're sick, they're gone on business trips. Private ramps downtown overbook by 20%, and they still have extra spaces. So, this is assuming 100% at 100% of the time. So keep that in mind. And then I just want to touch on a couple things. Let's start. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. It was in my notes. I forgot to mention it. The other thing was,
You speak in the microphone for the
other correction factor that I didn't mention besides transit and bikes and so on was the IT rates assume it's based on per occupied apartment. The real estate industry tells me the average occupancy for apartment developments is between 92 to 95%. So, that's automatically 5 to 8% of the units are not occupied.
But in our zip code, the multifamily occupancy rate is like 98, 98.5%.
Yeah,
Less
but
than
again,
2% vacant.
yes, but again, sometimes they're sick or they're traveling, whatever, they're off on business, whatever. There is turnover, so. But we have a solution, so we agreed with Eileen that we would like to have you conditionally require, in other words, if we get into a situation in phase one, because we're going to have a year of operating history coming up here, you could then order us to put in 17 more parking spaces in phase one, and you could order us to put in 29 more spaces in phase three with the lift and slide. So you could do that, and you could leave it up to staff to order that up.
Phase 3 or phase 2?
Phase 2.
Phase 3, sorry,
They
that's
don't have any
that's a
lifts.
typo. We don't have any lifts in phase 2.
Yeah, that's in
But
the.
you say phase 2 there, but.
I know, it's a mistake.
Yes,
That's a
but
typo.
The document before
Yeah.
us is.
Phase 3. And then, before we went to Bruce Company, we do have a signed lease with the Bruce Company. It is exactly 0.6 miles, so 0.6 of 1 mile. The other lot, which we have no control of, I don't know why we're talking about a property we have, this other place across the Beltline, that's 0.5, so it's 1/10 difference. That is walkable, but more importantly, we would provide the shuttle, the community cars as a shuttle. So we would tell people, if you're willing to park over there, you can use our community car as a shuttle. Of course, you got to take some other people with you from that lot to here. So we have that lease signed. That's 104 spaces. So we can satisfy this number. We believe we'll never park anybody on Bruce Company's property because we don't need it. We have so many parking spaces here, it's ridiculous. But we will provide this and the lease is signed. We did, before we got Bruce Company signed, we did approach the city about, hey, you signed a lease with Middleton Station for a public lot, and you're doing one here tonight with Artis on a public property. Why not sign a lease with us on a lot downtown?
I got an update on that.
Okay.
I told the Plan Commission I was going to tell you. I always thought, based on what our attorney had said when we were doing the second phase of downtown redevelopment, that the only way we could ever lease parking downtown or anywhere was if it was new parking, new right-of-way, in the right-of-way, or a new surface lot. Our attorneys feel it's absolutely true. If you're doing it on the street, it has to be new parking, new right-of-way to do a lease with a private entity. They said, however, they're fairly comfortable if the city wanted to consider leasing property or leasing spaces to a development entity, if they wanted to consider it, that it could be done with existing parking. Now, there's a couple things with the Terrace Avenue lots that would be a consideration. One is we may redevelop that at some point. The city may say, well, gosh, we want to redevelop it. How many spaces would be needed to lease? Because the time frame that we're talking about, again, is in the evening. And I'm parked over there right now, and I bet when I go over there's probably 3 cars there. So 5 to 12 every night might be something reasonable. But would the city consider that? I think that the lift and slides should be put in phase 1 and 3 because it's preferable to have them on site. As you said when you first suggested them back when we were considering the development, they can be taken out if they're not needed. I also feel strongly that the city should consider evaluating each phase for 1 full year after it's completely occupied. Through all 4 seasons, because let's face it, it's way different in July than it is in January in terms of the weather and the conditions and how much people are going to walk. And I understand what you're saying about the Bruce Company, but our concern as a staff is, yeah, you might satisfy it, but then you may also, somebody's going to say, well, I'm not going to park there. I'm just going to park on the street, and then you're displacing somebody else from another business who is already, or some other customer, and it's not completely providing your parking.
Right. So we would give a credit for people who didn't have. We are including in the rent like you required, and I agree with you. The parking included in the rent. But if somebody doesn't have a car, we can provide them either a credit or we can give them a monthly bus pass. The credit is because they don't have a car, so they should be rewarded for that. And they can't park on the street because the city's now enforcing their 2-hour parking limit. So they won't be able to park on the street and take up spaces as as employees of other private businesses do today. But I also am wondering, there's a proposal for development of that little green strip by the TDS building where there's been some talk about requiring no parking for his development, and I don't understand why there's a different standard being applied to us compared to that. I mean, he should be required to provide parking, just like we're being required to provide parking. Because otherwise, if he doesn't have parking, his employees and customers, they're going to be parking in our lot. And then we've got a problem, right? So, we're happy to provide this solution. We're happy to put in these extra lifts to satisfy this. We'll provide the extra parking at the Bruce Company unless the city would be willing to lease us some of the lots on Terrace. We'd be happy to do that to solve this alleged parking issue. But I can tell you that I want to just say some things about the Bruce or the Walker study so that you are fully informed, because some of these things the city's not aware of, because we really dug into it. First of all, there's this Walker study. They keep quoting the ULI study, the ULI study, the ULI study. And we all assume that's some kind of independent third-party study. Well, it's not. Walker is quoting a study that they wrote. The name of the author is the same author, same employee of Walker who wrote the study for ULI. They are quoting their own numbers. It is not an independent, legitimate study. It is a misrepresentation, frankly, which I'm really upset at.
But it looks like it's generally accepted. Your consultant
Is
quoted
that what
it,
your
so-
consultant said that he uses?
He
The same study, right?
uses ITE.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm just telling you that they're studying.
Yes.
They're just quoting their own report when they're telling you like it's some kind of independent study. It's not.
No, but it's accepted by the authorities. I mean, it's,
Walker's,
In the Walker
The goals.
report, in the Walker study, just so you understand.
I think you're wasting your time making this.
Okay, I'm just letting you know. They didn't come here at all. They've never come here to Middleton. They have used no local data, which is a requirement in their own ULI study. So they should have come here. They should have used their own local data. We have local data where you can show, we know exactly how many cars are in there show the chart on, because we've done the counts every day for many, many, many weeks. It varied from, up to 33% on a Sunday, but, most of the time during the middle of the day, you might have 10 or 15, 18% of the vehicles there during a weekday in the garage. So it's a much lower number. So it's just a sample of how different the reality is versus the study. That's just background. That's all it is.
Walker had a consultant who was here throughout almost an entire summer working on our downtown parking analysis. A few years ago.
But the guy
The
who
data's a few years old, but their consultant, Phil Barron, knows all of our downtown business owners by name because of the amount of time that he spent here.
Right. But the guy who wrote this report never stepped foot here, and he admitted that. So I'm just letting you know.
Utilized local information.
Yeah.
And
No, they haven't. They are required to survey and ask questions. They never have asked us questions. They've never asked any of our businesses any questions about parking needs. They never asked us about apartment demand for parking during the daytime. I'm just giving you background.
Again, parking during the daytime is no longer the issue because we're.
I understand. It's the peak hour, yes.
Peak hour.
Yes.
Which is
But
in
anyways,
the evening.
yes.
The change of the program.
So getting off of this, we have agreed with you that we will do the lifts, the extra lifts, and we're willing to do the lease per what you've done with other
I
developers.
can't speak for that. That's
Right.
the commission, the
Right.
council. The council
I
might
understand.
say, well, we're not going to
Right.
because we might want to.
Right. So we're meeting your requirements by doing exactly what the council has approved and the plan commission approved with other developments to do a lease for additional spaces, which would actually then give us a surplus. Yes, just what we need.
And-
So we're not that far off, right, Eileen? We're not that far off.
Case you'd only
So-
need 6. Basically.
Exactly.
Okay, Kurt, go ahead.
Right. It's
So-
a small number.
Yes.
so
let-
I'm sympathetic because I want to make the development work.
Yeah.
And I do think that most places are overparked. But I'll still hold up Walker as the gold standard nationwide because that's and the ITE. So the question is, though, who should bear the risk of the calculation being wrong? And we need to be satisfied that the city is protected. So, right? I mean, we want to give you the relief you need to make the development work financially, but we need some really strong guarantee that we're going to be protected. And I don't know if, I mean, I'm not sure the Bruce Company lease solves the problem, although it's not as much of a problem for me, because I think if you give credit to apartment dwellers who don't have two cars, only have one car, right? Because it's implied 2 spots
No car.
if they have no car. The issue is that a lot of millennials and baby boomers, they downsize from, what the data I've seen, from 2-car households to 1-car households, not to no-car households.
We still give it credit, though, for
But
the
you
2
get
bedroom,
credit.
for the 2-bedroom units, yes.
But how do we protect that restaurant goers on the evenings are not displacing other parking from other downtown businesses, right? That's the big issue.
I'd like to talk about this option that Walker laid out about the second level of Building D becoming parking instead of making those into residence. That would give like 50 spaces. And if you needed, you could go on 3rd floor, 4th floor to build out to get the back. But to get the parking and get it inside the development where it belongs.
We did look at adding, yes, a second floor of structured parking. So you'd have the parking underground, then you'd have the retail. First floor, you have structured parking, and then you'd have apartments above. So the cost of that was, it's about 35 grand a space. And what does that come to on, what was the number you had, 50?
About 50.
Yeah, it was like 5.5 or 6 million, because you also have, architectural engineering, all that. So it's 5.5 or 6 million dollars. We actually even offered to the city that, hey, you've got surplus TIF funds. Why don't you, city, pay for that level and make it public parking? Instead of building a whole ramp, we'll give you the heirs rights, to a level so you can have public parking in there. And they did look at that seriously. So I'm not sure what that bug is crawling back up into the line.
There's a huge
There's a huge spider right up in
like, oh my God.
It's that one from earlier.
It's got to be
this
big.
morning.
It's got to be big.
the same spider.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I don't like them either. So yes, we're willing to do that if the city can pay for it, make it a public ramp or whatever. Yes, and you would give us an extra level. We just go up another level. So we're willing to do that. We can't afford to do another $5 or $6 million of parking costs within the project. Our rents, because the construction costs are so high here, we got pilings, bore soils, environmental cleanup, all of
And
that.
to have that regardless if you have a second floor
Hmm?
garage or not, you're still going to have to put the pilings in, aren't you?
Oh yes, I'm just saying our rents are already so high. I just, we're above the current market because, the recessionary rents are still there, and we're, $10 a foot over the current market in terms of old
But this wouldn't
buildings.
take up any more surface area. It would,
Right.
and
But if
it
you-
would be contained within.
If you took a story of apartments out and replaced it with parking,
Then we'd be in bigger trouble.
You'd
We'd
lose
revenue.
You'd lose increment.
Right.
But
for
you
the-
could go
But she's saying
third-
go
Go
up
up
a level.
one story.
third or fourth floor.
Yes.
Make up for that.
What is the current
Yeah.
height of building D in phase 2?
D is
Four
4
stories.
stories, yeah, and then C
But it
is
has a
5
little
stories
cutout
in the
that's,
back.
just ground floor.
Yeah.
Or-
So
You think people will be accepting of that?
Could it go up to
Another
5?
floor?
Yeah, you can go up to 5.
Next to the post office and to the.
Well, I would say if it was stepped back from the,
Oh yeah, we can do a step back or something like that. You'd never see it. I mean, you could even give us a 6th level on the building C, which is completely surrounded by our buildings. Nobody will ever see building C, which would give additional increment to help pay for that extra parking. Then you're talking that might work.
could you do more parking in C? Could you do a whole level of parking in C?
Um,
And then go up to 6th?
so we have underground parking there. We have at-grade parking. There's no
Right.
retail in C. And then
And do another,
we could either go up a level maybe or go down a level. Down is probably more expensive, but we might be able to do a level in C. But we need to create some extra increment, TIF or something.
well, right.
So you'd need an extra level of leasable
Units.
space.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess that would be
Your D.
on
On the
D. That would be on D, because we're at C would be at 6 stories then.
Right.
Although, yeah, I think the building code is changing this fall.
I
have to
really
check on
feel
that.
strongly that
I have to check on that.
that you have to have, we got to mitigate the risk here, and I don't think Bruce Company is anywhere close to the answer to this. And having them within the unit and within the development is very important, I think, to the downtown.
Mm-hmm. So would
On the other
you,
hand, adding $6 million in parking costs to a project that's already
yeah,
a knife edge for generating increment
But,
is another trade-off.
you know,
We
you're
have-
coming back and you asked for the 20,000 square feet, which was going to be commercial, or. and
Yeah, we
now
cut
you
that
want-
back- yeah, we
you're
cut
not
that
willing
back.
to- You want 14 apartments
Cut
there
that
instead
back.
of saying, okay, we'll go back to the original plan. You had one restaurant, now you want 3 restaurants,
Hmm.
which is more parking. You're going the wrong direction.
well,
You gotta-
actually, the adding of the apartments helps, was helping reduce the demand during the
No,
weekday.
I meant take out the 20,000.
Oh,
Yeah, if you went back to the original plan.
yeah, we did reduce some of it, yes. We did take off some, yes. Yeah, we took that
I
down.
mean, we already
Yeah.
had the problem of parking to
Right.
day one, and
Right.
now we can't
Now
keep.
we've got it.
Yeah,
And it's going to cost money to get parking,
Right,
you know.
right.
It's not the you keep building it, you know.
so would you,
Something.
Right,
if we
and
looked
that
at-
cost to mitigate the risk should fall more on you than the city, right?
It should fall more on
The developer.
somebody other than the city. I think,
I like that.
I have a lot of sympathy with building less parking than,
Right,
rather than more parking.
right.
And I think in downtown Madison, that works because
Yeah.
if there is a problem, somebody will build parking, right? Or somebody will add extra parking to a building that they're doing because there is a perceived need for parking, and in downtown Madison, you'll pay for it.
And you got parking ramps there too, so.
Yeah, right. But that isn't Middleton's at play, way. Now, halfway between this is sort of saying, okay, perhaps the developer does pay as if it was that outside person for an extra floor of parking. That seems not a bad idea for saying, look, I'm getting all of the parking that I need, that is probably less than still what the city are asking for, but more than you had anticipated doing in the first place. Right? And there's a compromise in there somewhere.
would you be willing to, if we add the extra level on building C in the back, would you be willing to give us an extra level of apartments on building D in the front, stepped back, so we get some extra increment generated to help pay for that? It's developer finance TIF, so it's,
So from
Off
street level, it looks like a
yeah, you wouldn't see it.
lower
would-
story building.
Yeah.
I prefer adding it to C, since it's back further.
Right. Now, I have to check on that, just, because the current code, I would trigger a different,
Construction.
yeah, I would skyrocket the cost. But the new code, I think I can go 6 stories wood frame, but on the structured parking, I'm not sure how that works, because that's concrete. So I have to check on that.
Well, then you'd have the parking, and you've always talked about taking out lifts if you didn't need them.
Right, right.
And then that, that's where you could start. You would have what we,
Right.
and then you can start.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at also going deeper, and put in lifts in building in phase 2. We could look at that also. So I'd want to look at that and then come back to you with one of those 2 solutions. But I couldn't say yet. I'd have to look at the costs.
There's costs.
Everything. Yeah, we'll have to look at it.
Probably be into a 3-story concrete building, wouldn't you? 3-story concrete base.
Yeah, it would be 1, 2. Yeah, it'd be 2 stories of above grade concrete. Right. Right. It complicates. 1 story you just ramp up. It's a speed ramp, and at 2-story then you start ramping parking. You lose 20% of your parking when you start ramping the levels, unless you can do a speed ramp to the 2nd floor, which is what we'd have to look at. Yeah. Which is why we might look at going underground, but then we got to go deeper. But that may be cheaper. Yeah, I'll look at that. But in the meantime, we got to get started. We got to build July so we can open July next year. We can't open in August or September. We get no leasing. We'd be empty. So,
I think we should meet again in 2 weeks.
okay, okay.
Council doesn't meet, though, until, they meet next Tuesday, and then they don't meet again until July 18th.
Well, I would say it's a very important project, and we want to do it right. We don't want to have an oversupply, but we also don't want to have an undersupply.
Right.
When I'm going around in the neighborhood in my listening sessions, it's amazing that even people who are living away from here, one of the most important thing which I hear is the downtown parking and the traffic. So maybe part of it was because, that when you were building, that created some issues as well, but those are the two things which I have heard repeatedly from people, and that is a concern. So, but it is a very important project, and as Kurt said, and David and the others said too, we don't want to have oversupply, but we also don't want to get stuck where it creates problem with the rest of the city.
Right.
So if there's you mentioned the documents from 2005 and 2004, if you have any other more recent documents, because that's more like 10, 11 years, 13 years old, I'd be more than personally happy to look at it as well if there's anything more recent. I know you mentioned about PGM more from 2016, so, but I don't know what's updated in that one. So, but I guess I'm not about to study every little thing. I'm going to have to rely on staff. But if you have something, since you are the expert in this area, which is more recent and would help us make this decision, we'd be more than happy to look at it. So, but otherwise, Walker has spent a lot of time, and I think if we try to meet what they are, after paying that much money, so they are credible, like Kurt said, it's a gold standard. So if you guys can meet what they're asking for, one way or the other, I think then we can move forward. That's how I see it. Is that how you guys see it too, or?
Agree with you.
Yeah. So I think let's look at that and work with the staff and come up with something which we all can work with. So we don't want you to make it more expensive or any of those things, but we also don't want our people to suffer. So.
And as Alder Olson pointed out,
yes,
we had an approved plan and now we're modifying it, so there's some need to
trying to meet the market needs.
meet the changed demand for restaurants.
Right.
The first phase is looking fabulous, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it
All
does.
Very nice.
compliments
Good.
on
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
kudos.
Okay.
So we want to be very fair, but let's follow what is there. So now, what do you?
Could I ask you a question so I get clarification? So I understand the parking issue is up in the air, but Eileen, what about the rest of it? The switch to the apartments, get feedback on that?
Planning Commission and the council.
That's what our next three.
If it could be potentially, I guess,
The restaurants.
the way I
and all
wrote the
that.
recommendation was recommend approval of it, subject to those conditions, with the parking to be adequately approved or provided, with
Right.
you and approved by the
Right.
Planning Commission and the council. So
Right. So if we add these lifts in phase 1 and 3, how much are we, in your mind, are we short?
short 6 during the weekday, in the evenings,
Okay. Peak hour 6,
58 during the weekend.
weekends
From
58.
5 p.m. to midnight. That's
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's
After
total.
After phase
completion of
3
Yeah.
is
Okay. 6 and 58. Okay. Thank you.
after completion of phase
And then,
three.
that's after we do the lifts, or is that before?
That's
after we add these lifts.
That's with the lifts taking up
Count.
some of the
Okay.
deficit.
Okay. 6 and 58. Okay. Thank you.
So it seems you are
This is
so
easy to
close
solve.
now, so there's no reason to reopen it or any. I mean, 6 on
And 58.
6 and 58.
Can you
so-
get 6 stalls by narrowing the width of some of them and making them for compact cars? I realize it's a tight squeeze. 6 is easy to solve over a
6 is
400.
easy, yeah.
58 is a little more.
So in a surface lot, you can do that, and I've done that. But there are columns in the garage.
turning
and that's so we end up with a remnant, right? We can't get a half a car in, But yes, that's a very good idea. I wish I could do that. And the columns are like every 3 spaces. That's the problem. There's too many columns, But that's a
Okay,
good idea.
so-
But we'll look at other ideas. If you have any other ideas, let me know,
So work with the staff and, sort this out. So is there anything we need to do on this one?
Well, I think what Terrence is asking is the Plan Commission willing to recommend the change to 305 apartments, I keep saying apartments, restaurant seats,
Right, 350.
and 14 apartments instead of 20,000 square feet of office, if he can come up with a proposal that meets our parking requirement based on the walk parking. I understand what you're saying, but,
Right.
We're pretty close on the weekday in terms of what you have. I think it's
Right.
29.
I would support
say
that.
I don't have
Yes.
a problem with the changes that are being proposed, but I also don't want any approvals given until this parking thing is.
Right,
Right.
right. I just
What
want
do
to
you
get
think,
feedback
Kathy?
from you, Cindy, about, if we're in the right direction or
Do you
not.
agree with
you know.
Cindy then?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And then
Parking?
a follow-up question is, okay, and a follow-up question is, can we get in your minds, it's subject council approval, but can we get in your minds any credit for if we added a B-cycle station or not? If we do anything like that.
Council already voted on that, I think.
I don't want to open that stuff up.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. I just
Yeah,
wanted
let's
feedback.
just deal with this. I
That's
think we
fine.
are so close.
Right.
And,
That's why I know it didn't have direction,
Yes.
Okay,
yeah, I think let's get it
Thanks.
done and move over, so.
thank you.
So then we don't need to do anything on 12 and 13 then?
Well, 13 is the request for increased, and I think the staff recommendation was approval of it, but we may be asking, I don't know. Abby, what do you think about that?
Can we, if we hope to get some more parking information next time, could we just also do those same 3 items next time?
For those,
Do the same 3 items next time?
Yeah.
move deferral.
Okay, so do I have a motion to defer items 11 through 13?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay,
Wait. Oh, deferred, okay.
defer,
said
yes,
approved.
yes.
No.
Okay, so, well, we are done, so I'll need a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Second, we are adjourned.